evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission this Wednesday evening, January 14th. I now call this meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Certainly. Chair Michael?
Here.
Vice Chair Kranz?
Here.
Commissioner Narita? Here. Commissioner Robbins?
Here.
Commissioner Renault?
Here.
Youth Commissioner Singh?
Here.
And Youth Commissioner Scott?
Here.
All are present.
Do I ask you about this? Okay. Welcome. We are excited to be here in person with options for those who choose not to be in person to still participate virtually. This meeting is being held at the San Mateo Main Public Library due to the construction at City Hall as authorized by City Charter Section 2.10. I'd like to share a few logistical reminders to help our meeting run smoothly. For those in the Oak Room, please note that after 8 p.m. the library closes. Staff asks that everyone exit through the back doors located directly behind the room, over there. After 8 p.m., the stairwell to the parking garage is locked. Attendees will need to use the elevator and select level P1 or P2 to access the garage. And please check, for Zoom attendees, please check your microphone volume before participating in public comment. MCTV will continue monitoring audio to ensure clear sound for all participants. Thank you for your cooperation and for helping us maintain an efficient and accessible meeting environment. For those attending in person, complete a yellow request to speak slip and hand it to the clerk. If participating remotely, use the raise your hand feature in Zoom and you will be called on at the appropriate time. If calling in via phone, press *9 to raise your hand, and when called upon, press *6 to unmute. These options for public comment will remain available until I close the public comment period for that specific item. Clerk, please read the consent calendar.
Certainly. It is to approve the meeting minutes of the Sustainability and Infrastructure regular meeting on December 10th, 2025.
Make a motion to approve?
I would like to pull that item, please. I have a comment.
Certainly. Is there anything that you have at the top of your mind that you would like to edit?
Yeah, in the commissioner's comments, the third sentence from the bottom that starts expressed a strong emphasis that, given the flow and the statements above it, that implies that the commission or all the commissioners express that strong emphasis. That doesn't reflect my view. I would prefer that that state either a commissioner or some commissioners, if that's what people want.
Okay, so what we can do is I can edit these minutes right now, and we can move to approve them as of the edit. Or what we can do is we can pull them and we can approve them the next meeting when they are edited and approved.
I'm comfortable with you editing it right now,
Okay.
and then we could approve it. So does that mean waiting or
Yes,
Okay.
I'm gonna pan them onto the screen and I can verbatim fix them.
Excellent. Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Robbins, which sentence was it?
Third from the bottom that starts expressed a strong emphasis.
Okay. What's the edit you would like?
I believe it was a commissioner who expressed that, so I would have no trouble if you said some commissioners.
I also expressed it, so more than one.
Okay, there you go. I have no problem with that.
Okay, so I will say some. Does that look good?
Looks good to me. Commissioner Robbins?
Yep, that's fine. No objection. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so these will be the minutes that we will then attach to this meeting. And when they are approved, we will upload the proper ones.
Great. And have we received any requests to speak on the consent calendar, or do I go ahead and do a motion on the minutes?
I do not have anyone in person that would like to speak on the consent calendar. I will give folks a few minutes online, but I don't see any hands raised as of now. I think we're okay.
Okay, so moving on, is there a motion from commission to approve the consent calendar with the edits made?
I make a motion to approve the consent calendar as edited.
Second.
Great, thank you. Next on the agenda is public comment.
Sorry,
Oh.
I need to call.
Oh,
No worries. Okay. Vice Chair Kranz,
Aye.
Commissioner Renault,
Yes.
Chair Michael,
yes.
Commissioner Narita, Commissioner Robbins.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on. Next on the agenda is public comment. Members of the public wishing to comment on any item not appearing on the agenda may address the commission at this time. State law prevents the commission from taking action on any matter not on the agenda. Your comments may be referred to staff for follow-up. This public comment section is generally limited to a total of 15 minutes. However, that is subject to commission's discretion and can be extended if commission wishes to do so. And one more note, we welcome speakers providing public comment, but please be advised this is a limited public forum. As such, speakers must stay on topic if speaking to a particular agenda item, and if speaking during general public comment, they must address matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. If speakers fail to follow these rules, they will be warned, and if they continue to disregard our rules, their opportunity to speak will be ended. Do we have any public comment speakers?
Madam Chair, I do not have any in person. I have one online with their hand raised. And so per adopted council rules, that would be 3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes then. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mike. Can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. I got shut out the other night. I'm glad it's working.
If you want to talk a little louder, it's a little hard to hear you, but we can
Yeah,
hear
sorry,
you.
I'm doing the computer because my headphones stink. But let me know if you can't hear me. But Mike Swire, San Mateo resident. Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you for your commitment to sustainability in the city of San Mateo. I'm speaking on my own behalf. First, I had some good news. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the TA board unanimously approved I think it was about $18 million in funding for the Fashion Island and 19th Avenue or Boulevard project that I think you've discussed in the past. This is to facilitate protected bike lanes on Fashion Island and 19th, connecting Hayward Park all the way to almost the Foster City Boulevard. So this is a great project. It needed a lot of funding from the TA, and they were very flexible. And the board unanimously supported it, and it was also supported by the Community Advisory Committee that I sit on. So congratulations and thanks for all of your work there. Of course, that's unfortunately where Mark Kramer died earlier about a year ago. So that's great news. And then I also wanted to thank everybody for their unanimous vote last month on Humboldt. It really means a lot to me and the others who rely on the bike lanes to get around safely. I mean, there's a lot of people that do not attend these meetings, that do not own cars, and perhaps are not comfortable speaking out given the current political climate. They do not have cars, and this is a vote that helps them get to work safely. I wanted to give kudos to you guys for having a student on the board. I give Commissioner Singh the best question award when she asked, okay, we're doing all of this about parking. Well, how bad is the parking and is it going to get any better? I think that was a really important question, and I'm glad she was there to ask that. One thing I wanted to ask about, or at least make you aware of, is that there was a statement made to the effect of that staff did not believe that they would need to repay the HUD $1 million or so that went towards the original grant. I emailed Public Works after that and asked what was the basis for that statement. And the response I got from Kathleen, which I don't know if there's an update, was that there is not 100% certainty and they are still looking into that. So I just want to make sure that we get an answer to that question, because if we do indeed need to repay up to $1 million, that could greatly influence the council's decision. I also want to acknowledge that, there's a lot of credibility at stake here for future funding. If we revoke projects that are getting grant funding, how will that impact future funding, like the $19 million we just got for Fashion Island? And then finally, I wanted to especially praise Commissioner Narita. I think her remarks showed a lot of political leadership, and it's very frustrating when members of the community claim public property as their own, and I
Great.
think we
Thank
need to.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Any other public comment?
That would conclude public comment.
Great. I'm going to move on to new business.
Madam Chair, if you could formally close public
Oh,
comment.
I formally closed public comment. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Moving on to new business, we have two presentations tonight. The first one will be San Mateo Countywide Transportation Plan update, presented by Jeffrey LeCap and J.U.
Jeff, you can take it away. We have Jeff LeCap from CCAG, and he will be presenting on the San Mateo Countywide Transportation Plan.
Thank you, Jane. Good evening, members of the committee. Thank you again for having me on the agenda. Again, I'm Jeff LeCap, Program Director at CCAG. It stands for the City County Association of Governments of San Mateo County, and I'm here tonight to bring an update on our countywide transportation plan. Next slide. And so I have a number of slides, so I want to try to get through them as best as I can to allow for time for question and answers at the end. For tonight's presentation, I will go over the purpose of a CTP update. Then we'll look at how we move in San Mateo County, followed by looking ahead to 2050, which is the horizon year of this long-range plan. And then finally, we'll conclude with next steps. Next slide. And so this effort is a joint collaboration between CCAG and the San Mateo County Transportation Authority. CCAG is the county transportation agency responsible for developing a lot of countywide policies, while our partners at the TA they manage the Measure A and Measure W sales tax that helps fund, plan, and deliver transportation projects here in the county. Next slide. Next slide. And so what is a CTP? It creates a vision for the future of transportation here in San Mateo County. It sets priorities and guides decision-making at CCAG and SMCTA as we, again, plan, fund, and help deliver local and regional transportation improvements. The CTP helps the county fit our vision into the MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission's Regional Transportation Plan, also called Plan Bay Area. Next slide. And so the CTP is really an umbrella for many more topic and specific plans. CCAG, we are responsible for some examples here for the congestion management program, the countywide active transportation plan, and our local roadway safety plan. Other agencies, such as transit agencies, have their own specific plans as well. Next slide. And so what's been completed since the last CTP? The last CTP was completed in 2017. A lot has changed since then on how we move and get around. These are just examples of kind of the larger countywide projects that have been completed. The 101 Express Lanes, Caltrain electrification, and the 101 Smart Corridor, which is our incident management program. Next slide. And alongside those larger projects, we want to also kind of just highlight, the other local projects that have been completed since then. These are just a few examples. On your left is the pedestrian overcrossing in East Palo Alto over at University Avenue. In the middle is just a representation of the many improvements made to local streets here in the county. And finally, I believe that's the Crystal Springs Bridge project. Next slide. And so this is an overview of kind of the process and the timeline we are embarking on. We kicked off our first round of engagement in fall of last year. We've been visiting all the transportation-related committees here in the county, really helping us look at how we move in the county and kind of helping us define our vision and goals. We are then moving into the next kind of element to the plan, which would be generating a project list for the CTP. and we're looking to wrap up this plan by the end of this calendar year. Next slide. And just some key outcomes we'd like for the CTP update. We really want this to be a practical plan. We want it to be able to be used at the local level with local, with the city's respective planning processes. We're looking to anticipate changes by identifying pilot projects to adapt to changing policies and technologies that are available to us. We're looking to establish a shared definition of equity to help CCAG and the TA prioritize funding. We want to strategize funding at every level, state, local, and federal. And then finally, we want to be able to measure progress transparently and easily by selecting a good data set of metrics for us to measure. Next slide. And so just how we're looking at and how we move in San Mateo County. Next slide. And so as you can see here, we've done a number of planning efforts in the last 3 to 5 years through the TA, through CCAG, and we really wanted to leverage the feedback we've received from all of these plans and projects you see here on the screen. So we're really using what we've learned. We want to leverage this data and really package it together for our communities to help validate, just to make sure that what we are seeing is what you're seeing in your communities. Next slide. And again, it amounts to about 30,000 touch points via online surveys, in-person events, and social media targets in various languages, and different groups targeted as well. Next slide. And so we'll start with kind of what we're seeing in terms of commuting. Commute modes that this data is from the census, and no surprise, 70% of our residents are still driving alone to and from work. One thing to note is that there is a large inflow and outflow of employees leaving the county and entering the county for work. Trips between counties are about 62% for work purposes. Next slide. And so what we're hearing, again, with commuting and our regional connections, on the left, you could see those numbers in blue represent the current inter-county mode. And when asked if conditions were approved, what would they prefer? And so you could see that that 61% of driving, it turns into 19% because more people would rather take the train or bus or ferry to get to work. And on the right here, the question was asked, what county would you like to be prioritized for improving travel connections with San Mateo County? The one thing I wanted to highlight was Alameda County came in second, and I think it really is because of the need for more east-west connections. A lot of the workers that work in San Francisco and the Silicon Valley, they have more options like Caltrain, but there's less on that east-west commute. So that was kind of the response we got through that survey. Next slide. And so I'm going to go through three networks. We'll start with the roadway network. Next slide. And so the top concern we're hearing in the North and South County is traffic congestion. It's a little bit different on the coast side. They are a little bit more concerned with weekend congestion due to the visitors coming in on the weekend. And when asked, driving feels useful and mostly reliable, but on the other side, it's unsafe and expensive. Next slide. And so just moving on to our transit network, we have our major transit providers, which is Caltrain, Samtrans, which kind of serves as more of the backbone network, transit network for our county. And we also have our employer shuttles. So these are the shuttles that are provided by cities and employers from transit stations to employment hubs. Next slide. And so what we're seeing in terms of rail, that table on the right, the upper right, shows how how most people are getting to regional transit. In the North County, most people are driving or taking local transit to regional transit. But on the other side, down in Mid and South County, most people are walking. I think it's because it's a little bit more hilly in the North County. In terms of ridership, BART and Caltrain, ridership is continuing to decline, but it's still at 50 to 70% of pre-pandemic levels. Next slide. And what we're seeing in bus and shuttle, Samtrans is kind of the getting the gold star in terms of their ridership. They're back to pre-pandemic levels. However, on the other side, our commute shuttles are still at below 50% of pre-pandemic levels. And I think it's mostly attributed to the return to office and kind of the work from home situations that most workers have currently. Next slide. And so what we're hearing with transit, more frequent and reliable transit along the 101 corridor. People want to take transit more often but need more frequent and reliable service, more first, last mile solutions. We've been hearing that. That's kind of the top comment we've been hearing when we've been doing this roadshow since November, is the need for more first, last mile solutions and more affordable fare options as well. Next slide. And finally, our active transportation network. This screenshot is from our countywide bike plan. As you could tell, there's still gaps that need to be filled in. We are anticipated to begin the next update to our comprehensive bike ped plan. And one thing we're really excited about is we will be doing a sidewalk inventory as part of that plan for the pedestrian element. So that's something to look forward to. Next slide. And what we're hearing in terms of active transportation, safety while biking, walking, or rolling was the highest concern identified along the 101 corridor. People want to bike and walk more, but need more intersection improvements, more Highway 101 crossings, better lighting, more benches, trees, and resting spots, and more low-stress bike and walk facilities on major corridors such as El Camino Real. Next slide. Next slide. And so in parallel with our CT, oh, sorry, can you go back? Yeah, no worries. In parallel with our CTP update, these are just another kind of the other kind of efforts that are underway. Samtrans is embarking on a Dumbarton corridor study to look at express buses near the Dumbarton Bridge. As you might know, the US 101 State 92 interchange is going through is under construction for area improvements. The TA is currently wrapping up the 101 Corridor Connect plan, and CCAG is continuing to implement the countywide local roadway safety plan. Next slide. And so some of the factors that we have in, that are kind of in the forefront when we're thinking about looking ahead to the future, the rising costs of housing, climate risk, the aging population, how we take care of them moving around. And I know that they're here already, but e-devices and AVs as well. And finally, the transit funding deficit is also something that will help, that's influencing kind of how we plan for the future. Next slide. And so I know that was a lot, but I really wanted to get to this slide and really I really want to hear from this committee. These are some of the questions we've been posing to get feedback on. First is what currently works, what's working well in the transportation system today. What are the most critical transportation challenges in the county? Are there specific neighborhoods or populations you feel are not served well? And the last one, and my favorite question, is if you had a magic wand, what one transportation project would you like to see implemented? And so this concludes my presentation. If we could leave the questions up on screen, that'd be great. Thank you again for having me, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. I'll open this for public comment.
Madam Chair, we have one online, and I don't have anyone in person.
Okay. So 3 minutes.
Mike, are you able to hear us?
Yes. Oops, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Your time's
Awesome.
starting
The
now.
thing didn't pop up. Thanks so much. Thanks, Jeff, for the presentation. That's really good. I was wondering if you could go back to the rail slide that shows how people are getting to rail. It was pretty early in the presentation. Yeah, right there. So if you look at the San Mateo stop, about halfway down, you see 66% getting there via foot, which is great, but only 17% getting there via bike. That's actually the lowest, while Millbrae's a little lower in the county. So I just would want to think about how we can make sure that it's safe for people to bike to the downtown station. And we've got good density. Maybe that's one of the reasons that so many people live near there and they can walk there. But again, it would be great to build out the bike connectivity such that people can bike to the train station instead of driving, et cetera. So, you know, we had to cancel the Peninsula project due to cost, but that would seems like a major way that people can get over to downtown. So thank you for the presentation, though.
That concludes public comment.
Okay, I'll close public comment and bring back to commission for additional questions and discussions. And could do it either however you like, questions first and then comments, or anyone like to go first?
Sure, I'll go.
Sure.
Hi, Jeff, thanks for your presentation. Knowledge is good. Helps us do our job. So a couple of things, and I didn't write down the slide number, but you showed early on that people who bike, it's 0.4%. And that's kind of what we've been seeing here in San Mateo with people who are using recent new bike lanes. It's pretty low use. Can you talk to that? Can you give us some of your insight as to why that is like that? And the comments we get from our constituents is that we put all this effort, we lost parking spaces for only 0.4%, and this seems to be a mismatch. I'd be curious to hear your comments on it.
Yeah, actually, can you go back to that slide just so yeah,
I didn't write
it was probably the,
If I see it, I'll probably recognize it.
oh, yes.
What slide number?
Yeah, I think this one.
Okay.
Yeah, so I did want to preface again. This is the statistics you see on the screen are for how people get to work. So it doesn't really also account for kind of just the recreational trips as well.
So were you able to parse out work from going to school? So is the only discriminator, it's either like work category, school, and just going to the grocery store?
Yeah, I think one of the things that, and I think maybe this will be addressed more in the bike plan, is really more data of just more bike data. We see a lot of a lot of other examples of counties that have counters like on trails and on other routes, and I think that's something that is really important to gather more data about kind of where people are biking, and so. Yeah, I think that's something I'll have to double check if that's something we'll be diving into this plan, or it will be addressed in the specific bike plan. Yeah.
So are you able to parse out that data because people are self-nominating, or do you look at a picture and say, he's dressed like for work, so he's probably going to work? How do you do that?
Well, it's through the census, so it's kind of
Self-nominating. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I was very interested on slide 15 and also on slide 30, University Avenue. Pedestrian bridge, which is something that I hear a lot from the people in my district, is a need. Trying to cross over Hillsdale is an Evel Knievel move. It's really dangerous. So can you, in 30 words or less, step us through the finances? How did you guys do it down in Palo Alto? How expensive was it? Is it something we can do up here?
Well, that one was for East Palo Alto, actually, the university.
Yeah.
It's at the border.
By the big medical building, yeah.
Yes. I believe the TA is doing their Active 101 plan, and they've also been able to identify crossings over 101. I can't speak to the specific locations that were prioritized, but I know through the Measure A or Measure W program that local jurisdictions will be able to apply for that funding as well. And then there's also other sources like the Active Transportation Program and other funding sources that could be kind of help fund those types of projects.
So you're talking about grant funding?
Yeah.
Okay. All righty. I think that's all I got. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Narita, go for next. Okay.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for coming. It's lovely to meet you. This is my first, I think the first time I've ever heard about a San Mateo County-wide transportation plan. And we get briefed on lots of different plans. So I was curious if you could just provide, like, what is the unique, like, value add of a county-wide transportation plan versus, like, the city-specific ones or the ECR-specific one that we got briefed on a couple months ago? And, like, what is that unique feature for the county-wide one?
Yeah, thank you for the question. One thing is one of the elements to the CTP is the project list, and this is kind of a portfolio of all the projects within the county. It could also some of them are lined bigger projects. Some are programmatic categories like a bucket for bike ped projects, and for those projects to be listed in the CTP would then, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, that it would be funneled into the regional transportation plan from MTC, and being able to, by having your project listed in the regional transportation plan, you would then be eligible for state or federal funding for your projects.
Okay, and are those, in terms of the prioritized project list, are those projects that you span 2 cities in the county, or could a project be wholly within one city to be on that prioritized list? What are some of the qualifications?
It could be it could be either a jurisdiction, it could be a project specifically in one jurisdiction, or it could be a multi-jurisdictional jurisdiction project. I think one example I could think of is the Grand Boulevard Initiative that Samtrans is
That's the ECR one, right? Okay.
Right. So that would be something that would be listed in the CTP as kind of a project that's kind of in the pipeline for the county.
Okay, that's great. And could you also expand upon any kind of thoughts that you might have, or the CCAG or TA have, about the east-west transportation corridor and movement? Like, what are the options that are on the table that we could potentially give feedback on for east-west? Because it does feel you're so constrained infrastructurally. Could you open our minds to the possibility of what actually should we be ruminating on there?
Yeah, so I guess I could mention that kind of when we also spoke to Foster City, and kind of their Magic One project they thought about was a tunnel under 92. It's kind of a Magic One.
Well, I mean, I definitely thought of that myself too. So.
And then also the same kind of we heard the kind of a similar response on the coast side was being able to, for bicyclists to be able to travel safely along 92 as well. But anyway, I think one thing that we were thinking about is kind of starting small is our TDM program, really encouraging carpooling as kind of a solution to help more help with the mode shift of getting people out of solo driving, and kind of reducing that percentage of people who are solo driving on roads going east-west. So, yeah.
Oh, and sorry, and infrastructurally, does San Mateo County on the Bay side have the feasibility to potentially do ferries?
Well, I know that the WETA, that runs the SF Bay Ferry, they're currently, I don't know what phase it's in now, but there's the Redwood City Ferry port that's kind of, I think it's almost in construction. But yeah, so I think they have their plans of kind of expanding service from San Mateo County to other.
But Redwood City would be the main like port within San
And
Mateo
I
County,
think there's also the South City port as well.
South San Francisco, like in South San Francisco. Okay,
Yeah.
super helpful. You can tell I don't take the ferry from San Mateo. Okay, great. And then just one question, maybe not for Jeff. The public comment said something about canceled Peninsula project due to cost. I don't know what that was I don't know what that was in reference to. Could someone?
Yeah,
Thanks,
I
Jay.
could go ahead and speak into that. About a year and a half ago, we brought a project that has been in the works for, I want to say, about a decade, and that's the Peninsula Interchange Project. After studying a little bit further, there was a lot of impact to local businesses. And in terms of cost, it just wasn't feasible. So an item was brought to City Council to seek direction on how to proceed forward. Ultimately, the project was canceled, and then we would look for other avenues to look for congestion management as well as safety improvements. And that is in the North Central neighborhood.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much. Okay, great. Those are all my clarifying questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Renaud.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to meet you, and thank you for your presentation. A couple of quick questions. You spoke about spring 2026 generating a project list. By then, you've been doing that?
Well, we will be kicking off that process.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit about how you're going to do that?
Yeah, we'll be reaching out to the public works departments and at all the 21 jurisdictions in the county to kind of help gather project ideas for putting this list together. There is an existing list from the last CTP update that was done about 4 years ago, so we'll be looking kind of using that as the template, and then kind of having new project proposals come in through that process coming up.
And so to our city, is that list already kind of being prepared? What's on the list? How is that going to be compiled to, is that a?
Well, we haven't really done our initial kickoff. We haven't started.
Okay, so I guess I'm just, that's something that's on your radar, that's coming up, and is there a plan to compile that list?
That is correct. We oftentimes do coordinate with CCAG in terms of getting our projects and our plans ultimately into the county plan that ultimately gets us eligible for grant funding.
Okay. And the process of delivering that list and compiling it, like, my question is there going to be public visibility into that list?
Historically, we have a lot of unfunded projects in our CIP budget that we do nominate from time to time. There are projects that are integrated into a lot of plans that we talked about that talks about vehicle congestion management as well as active transportation. So we oftentimes fold into our adopted plans to nominate into this countywide as well as the regional plan.
But I think in terms of public visibility, I think it would be probably a question also for Jeff in terms of, as they solicit the list of projects, is there going to be a public process then that would allow input on projects once those are developed at a further stage in the plan development?
Yeah. The other kind of future rounds of engagement is we will be going back to city councils to present on the draft plan. I believe we will be kind of providing the list at that time as well. Okay. Do that.
Thank you. You talked about a shared definition of equity and creating that. How are you going to do that?
Yeah, so currently there's different geography data sets that we use to identify equity areas. First is MTC has their equity priority communities, and they use various socioeconomic factors to determine those areas. We also have our CCAG equity focused areas that were developed through the comprehensive bike and ped plan, and I believe SamTrans's equity area geography as well. And as part of this development of the CTP, we really wanted to come up with a shared definition for our agencies to use. And so we're currently working on kind of seeing where we could, using the different factors and the different weightings that each respective agency did to come up with their growth, with their geographies, something that we could come up with a shared definition we could use in moving forward in the future for the county.
So this is a little bit of a comment within the question. As you come up with the definition, also come up with a plan to emphasize equity, right? So equity isn't the same as equality. So making sure that once you define equity and you define projects and zones of equity, making sure that you are putting an emphasis on those communities to make sure that they get their adequate resources to come up to the level of other communities. That would be my comment. Unless you want to, no, okay. I have a question my last question is about sidewalk inventory. Tell me what you're inventorying. Like just the structure of that, like if they're
We're looking for the gaps, sidewalk gaps, and
sidewalk gaps. What about sidewalk just needing improvements? What about, I'm asking about the pedestrian experience, right? You're doing it so that I can walk from point A to point B with a sidewalk existing. But what about the entire experience of walking from point A to point B?
Yeah, so I think that's something that will be addressed in the comprehensive bike plan through, I think that's part of the inventory process that they'll be taking, where there's areas that need to be improved as well.
Okay, because a bike is on the street. So I just want to make sure that pedestrians are taken into account. This is related to equity. Sidewalks are important places for people to walk from point A to point B. And so when you tell me a bike plan, that's on the street.
Oh, sorry, it's a bike and pedestrian plan.
Okay.
Sorry, it covers both. Yeah.
Right. So I just want to make sure that when we talk about equity and we talk about the experience of moving, that we're also addressing people who do not have a car and are just literally using a bike or their own feet, and the experience of doing that, and an enjoyable, safe, healthy experience of not being exposed to whatever it is, extreme heat, whatever, being able to do that. So that was, again, a question, a comment. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you. Commissioner Robbins?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jeff, for the presentation. Actually, really thank you for the packet. Those of us who've read it carefully almost don't need the presentation. You really had everything in there, but it's nice to go over with the slides as well. So that was excellent. I think your questions at the end, which you don't need to go to, I think you're going to get, effective public outreach, which is always a difficult thing. We've talked about it for years, but the more effective your public outreach is, I think that's going to generate better answers than just the anecdotes of the 5, 6, 7 of us. We all have opinions from our neighborhoods, but I think that's really going to get you better data. And then this is really, I guess, a comment. I may circle back if we go back through the line, but a more important comment is I understand the need for plans, and here we have an overarching plan over many other plans. I've worked with the city long enough to know, and the county that, and the state that, we are plans. That it happens, and it's important. But two things that you mentioned at the very beginning, or quite frankly, I think they were in Matt's, in his summary up at the beginning, his introduction, but the importance of measuring progress, and really nothing in the presentation went to that, and also the importance of strategizing for funding. I think as plans are developed, you need to really do both, because otherwise, and I've been doing this long enough to know the plans keep coming back, and we go, isn't that nice? And that's a nice ask, or a want, or a desire. But if it's never going to get anywhere near funding, or if we can't measure progress, we don't really know how good the plan is. So those are two things I would really like to see, even in early drafts of plans, even if it's blank. This is an item, and we need to focus on this as we develop further. That's it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Youth Commissioner Scott?
I have one question about like how the data was gathered. Like I'm sort of concerned about how representative it is. Like were people like reached out to fill out these surveys, or how's that sort of gathered?
Yeah, so some of those plans in the kind of that list were, some of them were they were kind of a variety of different plans. There were more specific. They were called community-based transportation plans. So those were planning efforts that were done within those equity priority communities that I mentioned from MTC. So for example, North Fair Oaks in South County, East Palo Alto was kind of one. So that's one channel of engagement that we got. There was other, countywide specific, I'm sorry, coast side specific plans as well. So it did run the gamut from different parts of the county that we aggregated as part of the different statistics you see that through the presentation.
Okay, great. And then also, just like thinking about youth, I feel like a lot of this stuff is relating to work, but especially for youth that are going to like private schools or stuff like that, do you anticipate like bringing youth into these surveys to talk about transportation methods to schools and things like that?
Yeah, so we're actually, we're doing a round of engagement. We're doing interviews with community-based organizations. So I believe we're targeting other demographics as well, along with the presentations we've been making to the different committees and councils as well. So we are targeting other.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, and Youth Commissioner Singh?
Yeah, hi, Mr. Jeff. Thank you for your presentation today. Going back to one of your earlier slides, I know you mentioned that one of the goals of like the countywide transportation plan is to measure progress of other plans being implemented and the quote unquote like health of our transportation system. So by what metrics are you measuring that? Because I know like for Samtrans, you were saying that like, like ridership is up to like 100% of pre-pandemic levels. So like by what metrics are you gauging like the effectiveness of other plans and how like they fit into like our goal for sustainability in the city?
Yeah, so that's something we're still kind of tackling. We really want to, come up with a list of metrics that have data readily available. So like the first thing that I thought that comes on top of my head was there is something that the region, the Bay Area tracks is the pavement conditions of the roads. And I know that's something that's a big priority to making sure that we're keeping maintenance of all our roadways and being able to track, how better or worse kind of our roadways are the conditions that they're currently in. So that's like one metric we're currently thinking of. And like you said, there's the ridership that's also kind of easily tracked. So we're really finding, trying to come up with a list that kind of encapsulates all the different modes of transportation and what's readily available so that we can kind of package it together and report out specifically for San Mateo County on how we're doing.
Okay. Also, I know you mentioned that there has been like a gap in transit funding, and I know Commissioner Robbins also touched on this, on how like, you need to evaluate how funding goes along while you're making this plan, because I know that like in your timeline, you mentioned how this is going to be an ongoing process till the end of the year and beyond. So yeah, that was just a concern of mine. Also, like within your constraints for like the feedback that you wanted from the commissioners, at the end, I wanted to say like within future needs, I would like to see improvement to El Camino Real, because I know that that's like a major issue for a lot of people relating to traffic congestion and like unsafe driving. Like I've seen that myself as well. But we're also like looking at it, like I know we've had presentations before looking at it as like, like an option for improving like all modes of transportation and giving like pedestrian walkways. So I feel like that should also be like high up on your priority list when it comes to March and like deciding what programs you're gonna put. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Sure. Go ahead, Commissioner Kranz.
When we're working with the, the 92-101 interchange, also when talking with the bike coalition, the bike people, just comes up frequently about there's no mass transit over 92 to go from the East Bay over into San Mateo. Can you speak to that? Is there a plan? Are you aware of it?
I believe there's plans at the regional level to
Okay.
increase bus service along on the San Mateo Bridge.
And it would include hauling bicycles along with it?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Part of going last is a lot of my questions have been answered, but I was actually going to hit on that too regarding Alameda. Is there communication between CCAG and our counterpart in Alameda County to work on this type of regional transit?
Yeah, we do. We do have relationships with the CCAGs of the other counties in the Bay Area, specifically Alameda too. I know that they've been working with Samtrans on that Dumbarton study as kind of an example. So yeah, there's communication there.
And I was also inspired by Youth Commissioner Scott about his school travel. I don't know if this would be in the scope, but I think it would be so interesting to have surveys also about school travel, because I know as a person who has to drive their kids to school that is a huge part of local traffic and ways to, and it would also help identify safe routes to school or other project potential opportunities.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we do through we do have our countywide Safe Routes to School program that does, I think, fall and spring surveys of how kids or parents and kids get to school. I think that'd be great to see if we can incorporate that as well.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And then also just about the project list, as that gets worked on, will that be brought to the Sustainability Commission to review or just be informed about?
I would say probably it's more unlikely that we would bring a list just specific for this plan to the commission. I mean, we program our own projects, and we'll be bringing our capital improvement program to the city council in April for a study session, and then part of the budget adoption in June. And then we do our own annual transportation update that, if you recall, we did that last year for the first time. We brought that to SIC, I believe. So we'll be doing that again, and it will provide maybe a bit more focused look at some of the things that people have asked tonight in terms of like metrics. That's part of what we're trying to do with that annual transportation update. So, I don't think that usually for these sorts of things, CCAG and the TA are looking for sort of the larger scale projects that make sense to go into a countywide plan. And so we will provide them whatever we have that makes sense to be part of that. And then that's critical for us usually is to make sure that our projects get into these plans, because that usually is contingent on if you want to get funding from these agencies in the future, is that they have to be part of these plans. So there's a subset of the projects that we would want to pursue here in the city of San Mateo that would make sense to go into a countywide plan. So I'm not sure that it is the kind of list of projects that makes sense to have a specific item to come to the commission. But we can work on making sure that as that list gets developed, that we can try to provide information to the commission to make sure that they're aware of the public outreach process and whatnot, so you have visibility into that. But I just don't know that it would make sense to bring a specific item to the commission on that.
I imagine that you'd probably want most of our CIP projects to go into the plan and to be earmarked for potential funding.
Yeah, like I say, they have to be ones usually to go into a countywide plan. They have to be sort of the larger, bigger projects like our Fashion Island, 19th Avenue, those types of projects. I think to Commissioner Kranz's question about, the Hillsdale overcrossing, that was a project that at the time, I think it was 60 million-ish. And just to answer your question about what it takes to do those, San Carlos did get money approved in the highway program from the TA for their Holly Street overcrossing, which is $110 million. So they're very expensive. It's gone up since we were looking at 60, and we sort of put that on pause at the time because it wasn't really financially feasible. But those are the types of projects that make sense to get into a plan like that, is the larger scale ones that require the larger dollar amounts. Some of our smaller scale stuff, it just doesn't rise to the level of making sense to be in a countywide plan.
That makes sense. Thank you. I'm just going to go ahead and provide some comments and go back around. But this slide that we have up front here, I think this tells the major story about where we should focus. It's really interesting that average distance of commute is 20 miles. So while walking and biking is important, I think the focus on commute really should be transit, to travel across counties and to get those distances, because many people may ride their bike, but they may not ride 20 miles. And I think looking at the regional is very important, especially when we hear survey respondents say that this table showing that trips between counties is most of commuting happening. But I really appreciate all this information. Thank you. And I think if I had my magic wand, I would just want to ask every person what's keeping them from getting on the train and doing what it takes to get them on it. Anyone else want to add comment? Commissioner Kranz, did you want to?
No, I think it's, I think as we're, how do I want to say this? As we're being encouraged to grow by the building of more living space, 7-story, 9-story, we're going to have to wrestle with this stuff because and I'm glad we're doing it early rather than late and chasing it, because this is going to become a big deal as we grow and as we get more people living here. We have to have a comprehensive plan. And I'll just say this, we need to do it right the first time, because if you don't have the money and the time to do it right the first time, you'll find time the second time. So we really need to have a comprehensive, well-thought-out plan and execute it. And like you're saying, we have to have the metrics to see if we're on target or if we're getting some form of drift. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Narita. Go.
Thanks. Do you mind going back to the slide at the very end with your questions on it? And in the meantime, Matt, in addition to Fashion Island, for these, or maybe it's also Jeff, are these shovel-ready projects that go into this project list, or are they also like exploratory design phase projects? Like, could a reimagining of Hillsdale once again, like, would that qualify for the project list, or is it more like, no, we have everything, we just need money projects?
I'll defer to Jeff to answer that. I think typically it's all types of projects can go into the plans, but once you start getting to the point of asking for funding and going for a funding call for projects, then you usually have to have more shovel-ready projects if you're trying to get construction funds. But I think for a plan like this, it could be ideas of things that you want to pursue. But I'll definitely defer to Jeff on what they're going to be looking for.
That's correct, yeah. So
Okay.
It could span from, conceptual all the way to...
All the way to shovel-ready. Okay, great. And then, and so for the Peninsula thing that got canceled, was that the number one bike thing in the bike master plan, or is that a different project? I'm sorry. Just wanting to be clear.
It was a different project,
Oh, okay.
but there is some connectivity to it because the Peninsula Corridor actually is the number one priority project in the bicycle master plan.
And is any of the bike plans, any of the bike projects we have, Jay, of the size qualification for the county project, for the county plan, or are those all like smaller dollar projects?
No, we actually have some flexibility in regards to how we package it up, and I think that's the nuance of our CIP cycle, right? I think there are a specific, over 100 segments that are identified
Exactly.
in the high, medium, high, or the priorities. We can package that up how we want
But
to.
like we could bundle.
We can bundle.
Okay,
yeah.
okay,
A
gotcha.
good example of that is our Peninsula Corridor Complete Streets project that we received a little over $1 million in highway funding recently, and that is a Complete Streets project that will look at multiple modes, and bicyclists is one of them.
Amazing. Okay, thank you. Okay, super, super great. Okay, now comments. I take Caltrain to work, and I am so impressed that the Caltrain electrification was on time, and that it's working really well for the most part, and it's an amazing experience, and more people should take the Caltrain because it's freaking awesome now, especially now. You get internet, the internet's reliable, it's super great. So I actually think that's working really well. I have grand ambitions to bike to the Caltrain. I'm not actually that far from it, but I have just intrepid fear about bike boulevards, as the commissioners know. I'm not a confident biker, so I just get a little nervous about it. So to me, like some of the things that I could imagine preventing, like that first mile, last mile, is more of like the regular, like painted, protected bike lanes or like demarcated bike lanes of some sort versus bike boulevards. So I do think some sort of bundling, Jay, like you mentioned, of the bike master plan priority projects would always be great for inclusion into the countywide one. I would also want to flag something that I think is a gap. The library is announcing things. That is a gap is the connectivity for bike and ped infrastructure, but especially bike infrastructure between cities. This chronically falls through the cracks. This is one of my pet peeves. We have an amazing, beautiful bike lane in San Mateo on Pacific. And then once you get into Belmont, it becomes this crazy bike boulevard with like where the bicyclists are still just biking like they're on a protected bike lane, but now they're competing with cars, and it's always terrifying to me when I witness that. So it's like, what's that connectivity? What is the opportunity for a connection between various counties to ensure that to Commissioner Renaud's point, the experience of the biker and of the pedestrian is fluid and safe as they span cities, because that is not something that a city by itself can do, but a county plan can do. So are there unique opportunities to feature or prioritize or incentivize projects where cities get more points or more money or more priority if they collaborate together and think about their residents' experience as they move through and between different cities? I think that's actually a really unique opportunity for the county plan that no city plan can do. And so to build on that point, I do agree with Commissioner Singh about El Camino Real. I think the Grand Boulevard idea is very exciting. I think we need to start making some big bets, like as a county, on like what we want the county to look like and be like and feel like. It seems like El Camino Real is a very safe big bet. Meaning, what I mean by that is like deep investment in improving El Camino Real will not harm anything. Like it will go well. Like any sort of deep investment in El Camino Real will improve the lives of residents within and across the county and visitors to the county. So to me, that one seems incredibly intuitive as well. I think in terms of specific neighborhoods, just +1 to whatever Commissioner Renaud will say and has said when it comes to clear definitions on equity and just ensuring that the investments match the definition. I think a lot of the time we make definitions on things and then the money doesn't follow through. I mean, you saw that at the federal level with Justice 40 falling apart in light of this new administration. Let's not repeat those types of things. So if we're going to define equity, we're going to define communities, that should have greater investment. Let's actually have those metrics and those project lists and those standards to ensure that they are prioritized and they do get, an equitable amount of the money accordingly. Otherwise, it just feels extractive and just repeats the histories of our past. And then in terms of a magic wand, I do love the idea of ferries. More ferries would be amazing. That's really funny because it's about, anyway, my mind went to fantasy and like actual winged ferries, sorry. But yes, if I had a magic wand, I'd love ships, like water ferries, east-west. I would love buses over San Mateo Bridge on the regular. I would feel so much safer than driving over it. I would love, it would be a tunnel would be great. If BART went down into San Mateo, into San Mateo Hillsdale, obviously that's never gonna happen, but that is like my super magic wand. So anyway, I think it's just about how do we emphasize more transit opportunities and more frequent opportunities and more innovation. I kind of am tired of pilots of small projects. I think we need something a little bit braver. I think people are really jaded with the political environment that we have. I think local government still has people's trust and attention, And I think we need to use that to show that we're listening to people when it comes to affordability, when it comes to making their lives better, because they don't have any other safety net but us. So that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rennell?
Yeah, really quickly, and thank you for the +1ing my comments ahead of time, Commissioner Rita. But yes, that's exactly, I made my comments during the question area. So just underlining some of the things that Commissioner Rita said about making sure that we have an equitable representation of people who don't even have cars, right? Like I can't tell. So maybe this is just a marketing piece of advice when when you present this either to the community, to others, especially. I want to thank you first of all for making sure that the equity is part of this conversation. So I want to start there. Thank you, and congratulations for that. And on top of the comments that Commissioner Rita and I have made about that, just making sure that those statistics are really represented, making sure that we're looking at surveys that also represent people who don't have cars. It's, I can see the number of people who commute through cars and have single cars. I don't see the number of people who answered the survey that don't have cars and that rely solely on so, and I know you have that, so just making sure that those numbers support your values, our values. And then, and my magic wand is pretty realistic, hopefully. It is a seamless, it's funny because, when you look at a map and you don't know what city you're in, because it kind of looks the same, but when you're traveling, you get a sense of you're going into a different jurisdiction. And it's silly for you to be able to figure that out because of a tree canopy coverage that just drops instantly, or a sidewalk that just stops, or a bike lane that completely changes, or literally a street, or even, anyway. So I think my magic wand would be to have a seamless experience where people have a pleasurable way of getting from point A to point B that isn't just dependent on that jurisdiction. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Robbins, did you have more? Okay. Thank you. And Youth Commissioner Scott, any comments?
Maybe towards the magic wand, I think, sort of just echoing what my commissioners have said about El Camino, I think there's a lot of infrastructural, maybe repair and additions that need to be added to that, but nothing else.
And Youth Commissioner Singh?
Just to address key challenges, I feel like another major focus should be on the data that you collect and just making it more specific, addressing more concerns. I know Commissioner Scott and the chair brought up, schooling and the youth being involved. And then there's obviously been questions about equity and seeing these different groups interact. So I feel like just having more specific data and being able to present it, that should be also a part of what you present in March too, or whenever. Thank you.
I think you have a lot of work ahead with all these magic wands. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. I really appreciate the feedback.
I don't think I need to take any roll, so just moving on to the next presentation. We'll be looking at the Storm Drain Master Plan update with presenters by James Yang and Justin Maynard.
Through the chair, do you want to take a break right now, or do you want to keep it going?
I feel comfortable. Keep going.
Perfect.
Everyone agree? Yes. Okay.
Awesome.
We're going to march through.
We're just going to take a brief moment just to get everything set up.
All right, we'll get started. Good evening, commissioners. Tonight's item is an update on the city's storm drain master plan, which is being comprehensively updated for the first time since 2004. My name is James Yang. I'm a senior engineer at Public Works, and I'm joined by one of our consultants from Schaff and Wheeler, Justin Maynard. He's a senior engineer, and Schaff and Wheeler is working on our storm drain master plan update. This effort is a joint presentation, and I'll begin by setting the overall planning and policy context, and then our consultant will walk through the technical analysis and capital improvement program. At the end, we'll summarize key findings, funding considerations, and the specific feedback we're requesting from the Commission. Next slide. This item is primarily an informational update, and no formal action is being requested this evening. However, we are seeking Commission feedback on a few key policy questions. Specifically, staff is requesting your general commentary on the storm drain master plan. Staff is also requesting your perspective on whether the city should continue setting aside a small portion of the annual stormwater fee to address minor nuisance flooding that may not rank highly in the master plan. And we're also seeking feedback on whether this master plan update should help guide future stormwater requirements for private development, particularly as climate conditions continue to change. I will return to these questions at the end of the presentation after the consultant section, so you'll have full context. Next slide. Here's an outline of tonight's presentation. I'll start by providing context for the city's stormwater system, including recent storm events and why an update is needed. Our consultant, Schaff and Wheeler, will walk through the technical analyses, including system modeling, capacity evaluation, climate stress testing, and development of the capital improvement program. After the consultant section, I'll return to summarize the key findings, discuss funding considerations, outline public engagement avenues, and review the specific feedback staff is requesting from the Commission before closing with next steps. Next slide. San Mateo faces flooding risk from both coastal influences tied to San Francisco Bay and interior flooding caused by stormwater runoff. Much of the city's stormwater infrastructure was designed decades ago and does not reflect current climate conditions or performance expectations. Recent events, particularly the 2022 to 2023 atmospheric river sequences, exposed vulnerabilities across the system. But thankfully, the stormwater fee now provides a stable funding source that allows the city to move beyond reactive maintenance and toward long-term planning and investment. The photo here is from 2nd and Delaware. It's a known problematic area, and the city is currently working on a design to implement a fix here. Next slide. Here's a graphic of the various watersheds that we have in the city of San Mateo. The city stormwater system is organized into 7 major drainage areas. And these areas are served by a combination of underground pipes, open channels and creeks, pump stations, and storage facilities. Marina Lagoon plays a critical regional role, handling approximately 75% of the city's stormwater drainage. Because the system is highly interconnected, flooding issues in one area are often influenced by downstream or regional constraints. Next slide. I'm sure these images from the 2022 New Year's Eve storm event are familiar with most of the folks in the room. Flooding has been documented in San Mateo for many decades, with major storm events recorded as early as the 1950s. The New Year's Eve 2022 storm represented an extreme rainfall event that resulted in creek overtopping, localized street flooding, and pump station challenges. That storm, followed by multiple atmospheric rivers in early 2023, reinforced the need to reassess system capacity, reliability, and resilience under extreme conditions. Next slide. Here's the cover page of the 2004 master plan. Our first storm drain master plan was actually adopted in 1966 and focused primarily on stormwater conveyance, so just getting water out to the bay. The 2004 update expanded the scope to include a system-wide evaluation and included a regulatory compliance element, with regulatory compliance aspect particularly related to water quality. Since that time, most stormwater work has been incremental and maintenance-focused due to limited funding. Next slide. This limited funding constraint was in part addressed by the stormwater fee, which was approved by property owners in 2023 and implemented beginning in fiscal year 2024 to 2025. The graphic here shows an estimated monthly assessment collected as part of the fee. It currently generates approximately $4 million annually to support stormwater maintenance and capital planning. This dedicated funding source has enabled the city to expand preventative maintenance and initiate long-term system evaluation. So while the fee alone cannot fund all identified improvements that we'll go over later on in the presentation, it provides a critical foundation for phased implementation and leveraging outside funding. Next slide. You see draft over on the graphic here. We're working on a master plan update right now. It's currently in a draft format, and the purpose is to update. The purpose of the update is to reassess the condition and capacity of the system using modern data and tools. The plan identifies or confirms system constraints and deficiencies under both existing and future climate conditions, and perhaps most importantly, it establishes a prioritized capital improvement framework to guide future investment. This is a planning level effort that sets direction and priorities rather than final project designs. I'll now turn it over to our consultant who's been preparing the master plan update.
Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. My name's Justin. We actually have Dan Schaff here as well, and I do apologize that the cover is not as exciting as the 2004 master plan's cover page. I do enjoy that graphic. If you'll go to the next slide. Some of these slides have animations and everything, so I'll just ask you to advance right now. We want this study to be a pretty comprehensive look at how the drainage system in San Mateo functions, what its condition is. If you could advance a couple of times here. It's going to cover the condition of the system, its capacity, its reliability, and how it performs in the face of climate change. And I'll talk a little bit more in detail about each of those as we advance through this. But all of that goes into building a whole list of capital improvements that hopefully is actionable and guides the city's investment in these systems and making them function better. And that's that focus on design, fund, build. And then what we want to do by looking at climate impacts with this is make sure that those projects are resilient and adaptable. We don't want to just build something that works today but won't work in 20 years, let's say. Next slide. So we started with the condition, and I want to point out here that these numbers look a little bit shocking, but we went looking for problems before getting to this stage. And what I mean by that is we walked around the city with pole-mounted cameras, and we looked at it from the surface. And then we found parts of the system that needed maybe a little extra inspection. And if you've never seen a CCTV truck work, they sit there with an RC car basically with a camera on it. And I've seen those guys work. Sometimes they enjoy their job a lot. And I'm a little jealous. So these ratings that you're seeing here are those parts of the systems that we determined needed that extra inspection. So this isn't necessarily a representative sample of the whole system, and I just want to emphasize that the whole system is not 38%, ranking 5 structural deficiency. This is a subset of the system that we focused on. If you could go to the next slide. Another step that we performed here was sort of a similar process, but with the pump stations. We visited every one of these pump stations. There are actually 10 of them. We visited 9. There's one more to visit. The data collection effort with this was to understand the capacity, the condition of the station, how they're laid out, and get feedback from O&M staff, right? We don't want to just do this on an island. We want to understand what these people who work with these systems all the time think about them and how they work and how they could improve. If you could advance to the next slide. After that, it's collecting all of the data about the system, right? And this is what goes into our capacity study. That starts with the surface characteristics, and there's 3 points that we want to address here. One, what is that precipitation falling on, right? And that's this graphic on the left, right? There's topography, there's soils, there's land use, how much impervious is there at any given point. All of that dictates how that precipitation behaves when it hits the ground. How much precipitation is there? it's a lot of statistics. And then most importantly here, what's handling that runoff? How well is it handling it? And really, how can we make that work better? So all of that goes into our next slide, which is our model. And this graphic looks like a headache. This is what I've been immersed in for the last year. This represents 150 miles of pipe, about 15 miles of channels. There are 8 of those 10 pump stations in here. 2 of them are more seasonally operated and non-critical. And then there are 3 dams, one of which you're probably really familiar with, Marina Lagoon. And then there are 2 smaller ones at the upstream end of Laurel Creek, kind of on the south end of the city. Next slide. So that was the model. How are we confident that it works is kind of an important question here. And the city has really been doing a good job feeding us information on where real drainage issues rear their heads during a storm. And that's pretty incredibly important data to have when you're developing these things, because we look at these results and we could just accept them, right? But we want to ground truth it. We want to understand that the model's giving us results that we can actually work with and build reasonable projects with. So what's shown here is at Sunnybrae and Grant, where there are some known issues. There's a photo on this slide of those issues occurring. And our model is actually really mirroring those issues pretty well. If you'll advance the slide, there's going to be a little pop-up here. This is about 10 inches of flooding for multiple hours, and that's been observed. So the next step is, what are the capacity criteria, right? We have our existing conditions. We understand how the system is functioning now. How do we make it better? How do we make it meet a standard? And what is that standard? And you'll see in this graphic, there are the red lines, which represents the pipe system. We're holding that to sort of our 10-year storm capacity. And I'll just throw this out there right now. I don't love calling it a 10-year storm. It kind of sets that expectation that it's something that happens once every 10 years. But statistically, it really means that this storm has roughly a 10% chance of happening in any given year. Right, and everything we do is based on statistics. There's error bounds in statistics, and that's an important thing to understand going into this. So that 10-year standard applies to sort of our closed conduit systems and the smaller interior pump stations. The 100-year standard, something that you're maybe more familiar with in the context of floodplains, applies to those larger open channels where all of that drainage starts to concentrate, and then those large terminal pump stations like Marina Lagoon. And then recently, Coyote and Poplar were improved to better handle that 100-year storm. So if you go to the next slide, we have some animations here. I'm hoping these work. It should start playing. Yeah, okay, there you go. So this is kind of what the model produces. This is sort of our first set of models, which is that big interconnected model of pipes, channels, pump stations that we showed you earlier. And this is a little slow, and then it gets really exciting for about 2 seconds, and then it dissipates. So, but this is what we're looking at when we decide how well this model is performing and sort of showing us what happens in the system. And then it's what we're using to develop improvements. So if you'll move to the next slide, that's sort of our 10-year system capacity, or pipe system capacity model. Now, we used another sort of industry standard model here called HECRAS for the larger storm event where we're focused on the creeks. I'm going to be referring to both of these examples sort of throughout this presentation. So this is our existing condition model at Laurel Creek, right over by George Hall and El Camino and Hillsdale, which I know were just talked about quite a bit, in a totally different context, of course. But sort of those red areas are what are going to stand out the most. Those are a foot or more in depth, right? And this is a really big storm, right? I mean, a 100-year storm it's considerable, right? But we want to understand how we can kind of lessen those red areas or even eliminate them, right? And that's where these models kind of help us decide what to do with that. So next slide. That's what guides development of this. This is our current set of projects that we have together for a capital improvement program. And this includes 4 different categories. It's pipe capacity improvements, repair and replacement, which really came from that sort of review of CCTV footage from all of those pipes that we showed you earlier, the creek capacity improvements, and then pump station improvements. So I think right now, if I remember right, we have about 115 projects on this list, give or take. I don't remember off the top of my head. They are prioritized, and if you go to the next slide, that prioritization process involved reviewing quite a few metrics. And this is more than I've ever done for a master plan set of projects to sort of really put the numbers together to rank the projects. At least, I hadn't done it in quite this detail before. And these factors aren't equally weighted. I think that's sort of an important point to make here. Properties impacted, obviously, pretty high up there on that list of highly weighted factors. Cost it's on the list, but that's one of those ones that's maybe a little bit lower weight. And this is an iterative process. We started with a list of factors that we thought were important, and we've been working with the city to sort of refine that and kind of give greater weight to what factors are going to be more important in guiding where those investments need to go first. So if you go to the next slide, this is now, I've talked about the existing capacity of the system and how well the system is performing today. The process of coming up with those projects on that map that we just showed you, that's also a bit iterative, right? We use this model and we upsize pipes, for example, and we see how well that works. And if it's not working well enough, we keep going. So on the right, you'll see all these pipes in red. Those are where we've improved or added pipe to the system. And you can see what an impact that has. There's still that little bit of water in the streets, but it's less than that sort of half a foot or 6-inch level, which means it's going to be within gutter lines. And you kind of expect that to happen during a 10-year storm. So we've gotten rid of those spots where it's 10 inches deep and it's like that for 6 straight hours. So if you'll advance. Yeah. Okay, and here's a similar model result, but for the creeks, right? Again, I'm coming back to these same examples of Sunnybray and this sort of Casanova area near Laurel Creek. And you can see that the projects that we've defined have successfully gotten rid of all of that 1 foot or more deep flooding. It's keeping sort of this 100-year storm contained in the streets. It's allowing those pipe systems to manage this runoff without causing extensive property damage. And that's what we're after with this. So if you go to the next slide, the next step was integrating climate change predictions. And there's 2 factors here. One is precipitation. And for that, we used this CalAdapt website. If you've never been on it, I encourage you to go on and play with it. It's kind of an interesting tool if you're into that sort of thing. But what that gives us is it gives us these estimates of how much an extreme precipitation event might increase for a 10-year and 100-year storm in 2050 and 2100, right? Those are sort of our near-term and our long-term looks at how climate change is going to impact these systems. So the other factor is going to be on the next slide, and that's going to be sea level rise. And I'll note right now that this study is not meant to look in detail at sort of coastal protection systems, but it's impossible to ignore that facilities like San Mateo Creek, Marina Lagoon, they're all impacted by tides, right? So we can't just ignore that. It's part of this big integrated look at how the storm drain system's performing, right? If the tide's up, water's going to come up San Mateo Creek, it's going to hit outfalls, it's going to affect how the storm drain system functions. So this process used the State of California OPC sea level rise guidance. Again, an interesting document to dig into, but for 2050 and 2100, that's an additional 0.8 feet and 3.1 feet are the predictions that we're using. And that's the intermediate estimate. It's not low, it's not high, it's kind of somewhere in the middle. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to show you some of the results from this. What we've done is we took our CIP that we built and we ran these increased precipitation events. We ran increased tide boundaries through them. to sort of see how, and I think James called it stress testing these systems to see how it handled it. And the tool that gives us is when these projects go to design, it's multi-purpose. When these projects do end up going to design, these models can be used to support figuring out how to make them as resilient and adaptable as possible. It also gives us the ability right now to see where additional projects might be necessary in 2050 or in 2100 long term. They may not be necessary today, but if we understand where those are going to be, it allows the city to better prepare for those in the future, both by upsizing projects that are defined as necessary right now, but also to accommodate other projects in the future. If you go to the next slide. So this is sort of an example of that, right? This highlights two spots where there's sort of a weakness in the system with that additional rainfall by 2100, right? And this is a little bit more dramatic than the 2050 result. 2050, this is good news. 2050 didn't show quite this much flooding with the projects that we've defined, which tells us that our CIP is fairly adaptable. It's these additional projects that are going to be necessary that are highlighted by this. So the next slide, we'll go back to our Sunnybury example. And this also speaks to sort of the resilience of the projects that we've defined. This is our 2050 here. The last one was 2100, but in this case, you can see there is a little bit more flooding now with that 2050 climate change than the previous slide that we showed with the CIP complete, but it's hardly noticeable. Most of it is a couple inches or less in depth. And I think that's great news as far as, you know, the longevity of these projects that we've defined. And that goes for most of the projects in the plan so far. Next slide. And then actually, okay, so actually I had two slides. I forgot about that. The previous one, the left side was the existing condition result. This slide actually shows how much worse it could get with climate change if these projects aren't completed. And it's just that frame of reference that kind of helps understand what's going on. The depth doesn't change significantly, but the duration does, and the extent of the flooding. So that's kind of what this is telling us. Speaks to how well the CIP is performing.
You want us to toggle between the two slides?
Yeah, why don't you go back one more time? Yeah. I think that helps kind of see the difference. Right, so that left side is existing and then existing with climate change. The right side is the same on both of these slides. It's the case where the CIPs we've defined are built, and then that 2050 climate change happens. So again, good frame of reference for how well these projects are performing so far in our models. Next slide. So that kind of summarizes the work that we've completed. We've built the models. We understand how the system functions. We have a good list of projects that we think, you know, should be pretty effective at reducing some of these issues that pop up in the city, and then maybe even some issues that are less prevalent, but still, you know, we're holding the whole system to those 10 and 100-year standards, right? We still want those projects to show up, and that's sort of where the prioritization helps guide where the city needs to focus first. Our next steps are to finalize that CIP list, make sure we're not missing anything. We have part of this is actually going to be doing some preliminary designs for those highest priority projects to start considering what those are going to look like. And then obviously funding strategies are, you know, those are always the most fun part of these plans. How are these all going to get built with the dollar amounts that we're coming up with? So with that, I'm going to hand it back to James.
All right, thank you so much, Justin, and for Schaffen-Wheeler. So key findings: CCTV inspections show most pipes are in good condition, but additional field verification may be necessary to understand the full scope of system repair and replacement needs. Although recent maintenance has extended the Marina Lagoon pump station's life, it is nearing the end of its service life with insufficient capacity for future tide and sea level rise conditions. Most pump stations meet current design standards, but accommodating future climate impacts will require full implementation of priority upgrades, including added pumps at Marina Lagoon and potentially a new tide gate and pump station at San Mateo Creek. Number 4, while some properties remain in FEMA flood zones, updated modeling may remove 16th Avenue and Palm from flood zone designation, and additional projects are planned for 3rd Avenue in Norfolk and Hillsdale and McClellan. Larger regional challenges like shoreline and San Mateo Creek protection will require significant future investment and multi-agency coordination. And finally, open channel maintenance is essential to maintaining system capacity, and the city is pursuing a multi-agency citywide creek maintenance permit to facilitate maintenance work. Funding considerations. Ultimately, the question is, how will all these capital improvements be funded? While the stormwater fee provides a stable and predictable funding source, it's not sufficient on its own to fund all recommended capital improvements, which total, as you can see, $233 million. Further, when climate change impacts are considered, approximately $34 million is added to the capital improvement program, bringing the total estimated cost to about $267 million. Improvements to the Marina Lagoon pump station alone account for approximately $121 million of that total. Obviously, these are estimates, but staff is therefore evaluating grant opportunities, bonding, and other financing strategies to address these large-scale investments. Next slide. So this is part of the feedback that staff is requesting from the commission, but localized street ponding occurs throughout the city. I'm sure you guys have seen this as well, and is typically shallow, under about 6 inches, short in duration, and low risk. Under the master plan prioritization framework, these projects generally rank low compared to more severe flooding issues. Staff is therefore seeking feedback on continuing to allocate approximately $250,000 per year to address a limited number of these minor projects. This approach allows the city to remain responsive to neighborhood concerns while focusing most resources on higher risk system deficiencies. Pictured is one of the areas that we have received complaints about. Next slide. Another opportunity for feedback here is the master private development opportunities. The master plan update identifies opportunities to better align how private development manages on-site stormwater runoff. Strengthening these requirements can help reduce impacts on the city's stormwater system and improve long-term resilience. And any changes to private development standards would potentially require future city council direction. But this update provides the technical foundation to support that discussion. Staff is seeking input from commission on if the storm drain master plan should be used as a nexus to strengthen private development requirements. Next slide. From a public engagement perspective, we're nearing the end of our presentation, by the way. Public engagement is a critical component of the master plan update process. The city has developed a stormwater mapping tool that allows residents to report past flooding and share photos or videos. Furthermore, the draft master plan is anticipated to be released for public review in late February of this year. Staff is planning 2 community engagement meetings in spring 2026 to gather feedback before finalizing the document. Next slide. Next steps. Complete internal review and finalize the draft master plan, releasing the draft master plan for public review in late February. Planning for 2 community engagement meetings in spring 2026. Returning to commission/city council with formal adoption by June 2026. Initiating design for a subset of very high priority projects in fiscal year 2026 to 2027, and continue evaluating funding options for identified capital improvements. We opened up this presentation noting where we might request some feedback. And so first is general commentary on the storm drain master plan update based on what we've presented so far. Second is whether to continue allocating a limited portion of the stormwater fee to address these minor nuisance flooding projects. And the last item is whether to use the master plan to help guide future stormwater requirements for private development. Your feedback tonight will help shape staff recommendations as this effort advances to City Council. Thank you for your time and opening things up for questions now.
Thank you for that very informative presentation. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments?
Madam Chair, I don't have any in person, and it looks like I don't have any online.
Great. I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the commission for additional questions. I'll look towards the side first this time. Commissioner Robbins, do you have any questions or comments?
No questions. I have comments. Do you want to just lump them together, given timing?
Sure.
Happy to do that.
And
Okay.
just through the chair, just a reminder that was sort of the council's updated guidelines, is that commissions and council, that they would combine
Lump them.
questions and
Yes.
comments as a means of trying to make things a little bit more expeditious.
Yes, that sounds good.
That's what I meant to say, ma'am. Thank you.
Usually, sometimes that works.
Took the words right. Well, no, I didn't know that. Thanks, Matt. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think dealing with stormwater is a core city function. I mean, this is right up there, maybe less exciting than potholes, but it really is literally where the rubber hits the road. I mean, this is something that people feel, their day-to-day impacts. It impacts quality of life. It impacts safety. People walk, people get in their car. People live in this city, and this hits them every day. So I think this is really important. And to go to your questions, I think the first one, the nuisance ponding, I would actually suggest increasing attention and funding towards those items, because those are day-to-day impacts, their maintenance, their quality of life, as well as safety day-to-day. They don't come up at the emergency level, but I think the residents of this city need to know that after every rain, and we have seasonal rain here, right? So it comes down hard and heavy, that there isn't a huge problem on their street, and I think that's so. I would suggest actually increasing the efforts and the funding directed there out of the roughly $4 million. The private development impacts is interesting. It's not without controversy, to put on some sort of fees, in lieu fees, or increased regulation. But I think that's something the council should definitely consider. It's kind of above our pay grade, but I think it, private development has an impact on the city systems, also has impacts on neighbors, and to the extent, particularly I can imagine a series of regulatory actions that are actually not hugely expensive, but that actually make those private developments less impactful on the system and on the neighbors. So I would definitely think that's something that staff and consultants who have expertise here should consider suggesting, maybe back through us and up to council at the appropriate time. Trickiest thing are the big ticket items. For example, the Marina Lagoon, that's just tough. To the extent the annual amount can nibble at it, handle little bits and pieces, that's a good thing. But sadly, I think we're also going to have to find an access. The city's going to have to access state and federal funding at some point. It will loosen up. I mean, the marina particularly is, and all the stormwater runoff. We did I don't know how many years ago, we did the overflow tank under the Expo Center, and all these things ultimately lead to the bay, and that's not just City of San Mateo. So I think we really need to pay attention to that. It's not easy, but that I think is the only way we're going to tackle the big ticket items. And those are my comments. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Robbins. Commissioner Renaud?
Thank you for your hard work. Just a couple of questions, and then I'll also add my comments. I'm I'm curious about, in the report that you talked about 30% of the system was visually inspected. Can you explain a little bit about how, is that spread out? Is that kind of like you picked it, or how did you, what's the 30%? And who's not represented in that?
So that is done by a combination of sort of looking at what the GIS data tells us to begin with. And part of it is looking at where some of the older parts of the system are, where the CMP is, which tends to be some of the most problematic, right? Because that's prone to rusting. And that's one of the pictures that you saw on that conditions slide where sort of the bottom of the pipe was rusted out, right? Kind of understanding where those problems are likely going to be first is kind of a key to building a bunch of maps for us to walk around with, and then running around with pole-mounted cameras. Dan, do you remember who did that? Did you run around with those, or? My son. There you go. Another Schaff. So I think that 30% tends to focus on the areas we expect to be most problematic, which actually tend to be sort of the oldest areas.
And that's an important, again, part of my comments here is that that's an important distinction to highlight, to make sure that people don't feel like they were left out and their areas didn't be represented. So the fact that you just said that makes me feel like, okay, the 30% is actually the most significant.
Yeah, like I said, we went looking for trouble, so to speak.
Yeah, that's helpful. I'm curious about Marina Lagoon, and I won't repeat what Commissioner Robbins said, so I agree with everything he said, but you talk a lot about climate change and a 10 and 100-year plan. But what if it happened next year? What's the plan for everything for a next year plan?
I can say, we've, since New Year's Eve 2022, we've done significant investments in the Marina Lagoon pump station to get that station in the best condition it can be in terms of maintaining both the pumps and the diesel engines that control those pumps, making sure that the ancillary systems that support that are functional. We've added additional monitoring capabilities in terms of the water levels and controls and things like that, so that some of the equipment failures that we had on New Year's Eve 2022 don't happen again, which was the primary reason that we had the significant flooding around the lagoon. So I think the station is in a much better place than it was on New Year's Eve 2022, for one thing. But I think that the capacity of the station, was designed to handle a 100-year event, and I think, and Schaff and Wheeler folks can speak about this more intelligently than I can, but it was originally designed that you'd have 4 pumps that could handle a 100-year event, and then you'd have a 5th pump as your extra pump for resiliency. And so, but we're at a point now where we've kind of narrowed the operating band within which those pumps operate. And so we really are reliant on all 5 of those pumps working if we get a 100-year event. The New Year's Eve event in 2022 was, I think, over a 200-year event. So it was a very significant event. And so if we have events like that, we're going to have problems. Like, a lot of our system is just not designed to handle that. Our pipe system is generally designed to handle 10-year events, and then our pump stations, we're evaluating those for 100-year events. So there will be problems. So there's limitations in terms of what we can do. If we had a 200-year event tomorrow, we're not going to be able to solve for that immediately. But I think what we found from this analysis is that there are things that we need to start thinking about, and particularly with the Marina Lagoon, the recommendations from Schaff and Wheeler is that we start off by adding a second smaller station next to that station that has additional pumps. And by doing that, it gives us the ability to both potentially pump lower in the lagoon, which has been a challenge, that gives us more capacity, but it also gives us the ability to then have pumping capacity that allows us to start renovating the main station, since it's very difficult for us to renovate the main station all at once when you also need to rely on that every season when the rains come. And so, that's the recommendation. That's part of the reason that the costs are so high, the $120 million for just the Marina Lagoon pump station. As part of it is building a brand new sub pump station that would go with that, and then the bigger cost is renovating the existing station. So those are the kind of things that we need to start building towards. It's not something that we need right now in terms of you know, if we have our normal rain events, like I said, if we have a 200-year event again, I think the Marina Lagoon Pump Station could have handled the New Year's Eve event if we didn't have the equipment failures that we had. At least that's the modeling that Schaff and Wheeler did for us, that we would have been able to actually handle that event. So I think we have more capacity and resiliency than necessarily we think we will with the actual design. But that's sort of where we're at in terms of challenges of getting what we're dealt with Mother Nature. So,
Thank you for preemptively answering my next question about new pump station while then going to the old station. Thank you. That explains a lot. And then there's more of a comment of like, again, more communications. The people of San Mateo now feel like they're paying into a system and they have a $4 million budget. And having kind of like at some point an approved upon publicly available list of projects that where this $4 million goes into addressing some of these issues, I think will relieve people in thinking that their dollars are being used instead of saying we're paying into something and then we still have a bigger problem. It's just frustrating for people to pay into something and then being told there's still issues. So at least that there's something that people can know that there's progress with their dollars. And then finally, I'll just go into the nuisance project question. Those are like, I mean, it's a broken windows theory, right? It's if you handle the small issues, people feel like at least your government is working for you in little things. And if people think if you can't handle a puddle, then how can you handle a flood? I think that's how people think. And so I'm curious, or if you could share publicly for people, for the hundreds of thousands of people who are listening right now, how do you approach nuisance projects? How do you prioritize them? How do you, if you have a list of projects every year and you have this limited budget, which I agree with Commissioner Robbins should be a little bit higher because of what I just said. If you can't handle the small stuff, people won't trust you on the big stuff. How do you, explain to people how you approach which goes first?
Yeah, so right now, as we're considering these nuisance projects, I think that's something that we would need to study more because right now, using the criteria that we have, that we shared right now, those nuisance projects, as a result of not impacting multiple properties or maybe not having a high safety element to it, or some of the other criteria that we listed right now, those nuisance ponding projects would be low. And so we would need to then go in and almost have a more granular look at how do we then prioritize these lower products that would rank lower on the priority list right now. So right now, I don't think we can share how we would characterize those projects, whether we might go with residents who are more vocal or maybe products that have a little bit more exposure. Those are things that we would have to explore. But using commission feedback, we'd then go back to see how we can do that.
Commissioner, just to clarify, was your question a question about how to prioritize the nuisance flooding projects that we get from community members? Yes. There's a few options that we currently deal with right now, and I think one of the big things is managing them on where existing projects are, right? And one of the other programs that I manage is the pavement program. So where available, we'll make pedestrian or ponding improvements on pavement programs. Now, if there are projects that are deliberately related only to stormwater, where we've been doing right now is having them come in and then we deal with them on a package basis, right? And we look at them to see if there's an opportunity for us to make improvements for life and safety. Some improvements that we put out last couple of years have been related to health and safety, right? Now we are looking into projects that are more on a, convenience level, more of an issue of not dealing with it on a daily basis for ponding. So the thought is to package them where we can, but they have been coming on a first come, first served basis, right? So we deal with them as we see them, but we have to make efforts to make sure we're spending money on the life and safety ones first.
That makes a lot of sense. And to that, I would add just, geographically important areas, obviously, like if it's near school or near a park, near places where people congregate, where you're gonna see people feeling like their city is working or not working for them. That would, I think, would be also an important, and maybe not calling them nuisance projects, because that makes me feel like I'm being a pest when it's actually important to me. Yeah, I think I've made my comments on nuisance. I think they should not, lack of a better word, they should not be called nuisance, because I think they are what people expect our government to do. You had a long day at work, you stood in traffic, I couldn't make a left turn, and then the last thing I want is to be able to, is to get home, and then there's a puddle that is, for me, it doesn't feel like a nuisance. So don't think, I would suggest not to think of it at that. That is actually a big, important daily living of being in a city. And then finally, just to keep the theme of last month about all of us sharing this, this beautiful city together, I do also support the idea of strengthening the master plan, or having the developers be part of that process. We're all sharing the same space, and they should be part of the solution and not just adding to the problem. Thank you.
I will add real quick that we have been I think we've been pretty proactive about taking sort of those, again, not to call them nuisance, but maybe smaller scale flooding issues, and sort of incorporating the fixes for those into our modeling and making sure that where we know they exist, they do have, potentially at least some of them, have a project in the master plan that is named, and there is sort of an expected dollar value to it. There is an entire table of those issues in our draft right now where we sort of note where they exist, what their nature is, and what the solution is in the CIP for each of those. So I think as far as sort of treating those as issues, regardless of how big they are, that it's making an effort to incorporate that.
Commissioner Narita, would you like to go next?
Thanks. This is very exciting. I feel so honored to be on the commission at the time when the stormwater plan is happening, because apparently it hasn't happened in the last 22 years. Yes, I'm getting a little punchy and snarky. So to that point, I was curious, what is the history of not having a stormwater master plan in the last 22 years?
Well, we've had the stormwater master plan.
An update in the last 22 years.
An update in the last 22 years. I think one of the main things is the funding priority, the funding component of it. I think in the 2004 master plan, there are priority projects that are listed in there. But as a result of budget constraints or funding constraints, there are projects within the 2004 plan that are still outstanding today. And so I think one other update is just the modeling tools have been updated now. And so when the city looked at whether or not this would be a good opportunity, and also to show a good faith effort that with the new storm fee that the city would immediately jump on analyzing the stormwater infrastructure, those were some of the, I think, motivations for updating it now.
Great. And I mean, maybe this is to Justin, I'm not sure. Like, what is the best practice for how frequently one updates a stormwater master plan?
It seems to be a recurring theme that about every 20 years tends to hit the nail right on the head. I've seen as frequently as 10. I actually did the Soledad Storm Drain Master Plan back in 2014, and we happen to be updating.
Came back around to you.
I haven't personally been doing that one this time. I will say that to James's point about modeling tools, this is a great time to be updating it. We are using software packages by the same vendor. However, they are far more advanced. And to give you some perspective on that, the previous effort was split into about 6 separate models, and it was nowhere near as sort of cohesive and I'll call it comprehensive as this particular set of models is. And that was a limitation of the software, right? Those limitations have loosened, things have gotten more efficient. I mean, I can run the entire city's master plan model on a laptop now, right? So this is actually a great time to be updating it. The new sea level rise guidance came out in 2024, and that's been a factor. CalAdapt has come around in the last few years. So I think sort of the climate predictions have gotten a little bit more solid, at least as far as how that modeling data is used. And I think the other great thing about the fact that, technology moves fast, right? I mean, in 20 years, we have models now that are far more capable of really, really considering in detail how stormwater moves around in pipes, on the surface, between systems, into creeks. And the nice thing about that, in part, is at least some of the same projects as in the previous master plan are popping up, which is a good thing, right, on some level, because that tells us that, the model is still producing results that mirror what was done previously. The difference here is that I think we've been able to come up with projects that are a lot more efficient and a lot more effective at using the capacity that's in these systems. So as far as, it's a good time to do it, right? And 20 years seems to be a pretty frequent interval for this, or a pretty common interval for this.
Okay, so we really do have to land this plane though for 2050, because we're only 24 years away from 2050. So this is the moment. We have to get this right for those 2050 models that you showed us.
Right, we are. And I mean, as far as the limitations and constraints of those climate models, right, what the predictions tell us is going to happen, I think we've been able to use those to define projects that have a bit more resilience and adaptability than the previous plan was able to provide. So, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great.
And Commissioner, not to belabor this question, I think a big part of the issue of why these things don't get done is funding, and it could get into the nuances of Prop 218 and how stormwater is treated differently under Prop 218 than other utilities, but we won't go there. But I do want to say that it's not like there were not investments that were made over the last 20 years, and a significant amount of the investments that were made were dealing with some of the flood zone issues, and I think Jimmy could talk about that in terms of how much money, but that was a big piece of what Measure S, the sales tax measure that the city voters approved, went towards doing those levee improvements that got a lot of people out of the flood zone. So that was a big focus of some of the information that came out of that 2004 plan. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I can definitely add that too. I want to highlight that it wasn't just a city kind of led effort, it was community led effort. So a lot of special assessment districts were formed because of these flood improvement projects that were a partnership between the city and the community to help fund these works or improvements. So highlighting what Matt said, we were making major improvements, not at a very interior level, but more at a coastal level, right? So the South Bayfront levee improvements, that was 6,000 homes that got pulled out of the FEMA flood zones. And then most recently with the North Shore improvements that pulled an additional 1,600 homes. So the big thing about that is the protection, the physical protection with the stormwater, but also the economic benefit of not paying the property taxes for floods, for paying flood insurance. So that was the major efforts in the 2010s and the 2020s for public works in terms of stormwater.
Super helpful. Thanks for that history. And so along the lines of the $4 million fee, I was wondering if you could go into some of the thoughts you had about bonding it or other things. So and is the $4 million the only amount? That's not the only money we have for stormwater, right? That's new money we have for stormwater work. So could you give a more holistic picture of everything all together?
Yeah, sure. And this was, I was not involved at the time, and Jimmy could probably talk about it more, but I think when the city was initially looking at doing the stormwater fee, there was determined to be a need that, would have generated more money than the $4 million a year. But when public polling was done, there was just not community support to pursue that. And so part of the discussion with council was that they moved forward with the measure that was roughly $8 a month, I think, for a single family home. That it's about $96 a year for most single family homeowners, but that there would be a continued allocation of the general fund money that the city had been putting towards stormwater issues. And so that is part of our overall budget that is helping to support our operations and maintenance, is the money that is coming from the general fund. But the $4 million is really the big chunk of money that now can help us to expand some of our maintenance activities, and it's allowed us to hire 2 additional staff that are dedicated to storm drain system, and that's the folks that are cleaning our catch basins and cleaning our pipes that are helping us to manage these storms better. But it's also our big chunk of money that would go towards these capital investments, and that's part of the reason we have the question there about the lower priority flooding is that, the more money we put towards those smaller scale things, the less money we have available to go towards the larger scale improvements. And so we have talked about potentially bonding, similar to what we did with Measure S. With Measure S, we did, I think, a $50 million bond that allowed us to both advance those flood assessment improvements that Jimmy mentioned, but also our Smooth Streets program was funded out of that $50 million bond effort that was to fix our most significant failed streets. So we have talked about potentially we could do something similar with the revenue from this, but once you do that, then you're committing a chunk of your annual revenue to pay that back. And so we've talked about with a $4 million revenue stream, potentially it makes sense to say that you're going to dedicate, for example, $2 million of that annual stream that could go towards repayment of a bond measure. And that potentially could bring us in, $40 million or something like that, when we look at the list of the very high priority projects, when you take out that $120 million for the Marina Lagoon that we're going to have to deal with separately, we could probably fund all of those very high priority projects if we did, bonding against the revenue we have. But then we're kind of stuck. And so I think we do have to look at a combination of, bonding as well as going out after, as much of state and federal other sources of funding as we can to try to pursue these projects, because we have a whole lot more projects than just the very high priority ones.
Yeah.
So the more that we commit to, chipping away at the low priority projects, the less money that we'd have available for doing the ones that are higher priority, that have a bigger potential benefit to a larger number of properties, or they're also life safety type projects. And so that's part of the reason that we wanted to ask that question, is to get the feedback. And so we appreciate hearing the feedback, but that's, one of the issues we're struggling with.
And the $250K for the ponding projects, is that additional to whatever you had allocated before for ponding? Because you guys were doing these types of projects before the $4 million came online, right?
Yeah, I think some of that was being tackled as a different type of project and funding source. So a lot of that work was coming through pavement improvement projects.
That's what you were saying before.
Right, so
Okay.
you'll have pavement improvement projects come through that deal with localized areas where they can. But however, I want to point out the fact that we started to get issues where that started taking over the overall paving budget, right?
Yeah.
So the more ponding issues we started to do throughout the city on streets, the less money we actually had to pave the streets. And it's a balancing act, right? So there's opportunities where we can use that funding for areas that are, I think, a little bit more simple to improve on. But the overall scheme and size of the city, we would have to use primarily stormwater fee improvements.
And on a technical or engineering basis, what does it take to address the ponding that happens?
From a very simple means, it could be one or two things. The street could be graded in a very inefficient way where it causes pot water to store or pond in a localized region. Sometimes that can require fixing the concrete areas and gutter pans to move the water from one location to the other. And in severe locations, if you don't have that ability to grade or change concrete, then you may have to pipe it, right? So there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but those are the two main ways to do.
Okay. So this is not like, oh, hey, there's like garbage in the drain. We got to clear the garbage in the drain and then prevent the flooding. These are actual structural issues in the street that will chronically create this ponding situation unless resolved in like some sort of amount, given a certain amount of rain occurs.
Yeah, and I think I want to point out, like, to kind of put it to scale, because we're dealing with structural physical improvements and it could involve piping or concrete improvements, some of these locations for a few homes could be $100,000. So the benefit really starts to become smaller and smaller as you deal with these ponding locations.
Okay, got it. Thank you for that.
I think even the ones that, I think the scope could vary too, because the ones that we know about, at least that I've been able to add to the master plan, one of them, a pipe happens to be right there. Right. So, I mean, it could be as simple as adding an inlet and a small length of pipe connecting it into that system. But then there are some of these where the issue is occurring maybe 300 feet from the nearest pipe. So I think just to expand on that, the scope of it even can vary from add an inlet right there to add an inlet and then 300 feet of pipe down the nearest street and connect in a major arterial nearby, right? So.
Yeah, it can be simple or hard, but visually the same experience for the resident. Okay, great. And then I had another question, which is There, in the reading, there was a discussion about materials of the pipes and how we don't know the material of most of the pipes in our city. And I found that to be interesting, but I didn't hear it in the presentation tonight. And I was just wondering, like, should I care about that? Like, why was that in the report but not in the presentation? Like, I'm a little anxious now. Could we expand upon that? And, why is this significant? Why should I care or not care about
I will let Justin chime in, but I think one of the most comforting things that viewing the model results, how it jives with what we see actually during storm events or shortly after storm events, matches up pretty well. But
yeah, I mean, I think, again, where you're going to see the most issues is sort of where those pipes that you really need to focus your condition analysis on is what's important here, right? I mean, our GIS that we started with that sort of represents the location, the length, the size of all of these pipe elements, I think a lot of it lacked sort of that material type attribution. But if it's functioning fine, and I mean, we were walking around, with pole mounted cameras and not seeing any standout issues from the surface, it's unlikely to be a major factor in things, right? I mentioned earlier that the old CMP tends to be sort of the most important thing to address. And I think one of the nice things about doing these holistic studies that include both condition and capacity is that you can look at where those two issues may overlap, right? And it builds sort of a more efficient set of CIPs. One of the examples is down on Newbridge. We have a pretty high priority project defined where the existing pipe is also sort of like an elliptical metal pipe that's not in good condition. And the great thing about how we're doing this is that we can kind of define a project that both eliminates that CMP that's not in good shape and builds a new system that's going to be completely within the city's right-of-way, easier to maintain, and it's sized properly all at once, right?
CMP, by the way, is corrugated metal piping. So
what I'm hearing is that don't need to worry about that too much. Great, thank you. Okay, so comments-wise, I think, thank you so much for this presentation. Very exciting to better understand the storm drain master plan. I'm glad the modeling is lining up with our lived experience, so that gives a lot of confidence. I think in terms of the criteria, maybe if the criteria is creating an output of like, hey, some of these like projects that have maybe a high visibility are coming out as low, maybe like there needs to be some sort of consideration of like visibility or resident experience or resident, you know what I mean? Like something that ties it to more people in the standard, right? Like something with a little bit more like people and experience focused rather than strictly other metrics. If it needs to be that like these projects in some sort of bundled fashion or whatever needs to go up from load in order to be justified for attention. I'm not convinced it needs to be higher than 250 or not. I'm honestly not sure about that, but I do think it does something needs to be preserved there because I completely agree that it's a way to build faith in public works and continued faith. And to that point, I am very pro bonding. More money is more money. We need to have more money. There's no way around it. It's appalling that prior generations of decision makers, like made decisions to chronically limit funding, such that we're in this place right now. But this generation, the youth commissioner generations, are just going to have to like inherit and deal with this, and it's not fair, but it is what it is, and so we need more money now to resolve these things and to solve the root problems. So I am very much for bonding or other types of ways to generate more money from leveraging the $4 million. I think that we just can't keep doing this incremental stuff. Like this is structural stuff that's been kicked down the road. The can's been kicked down the road so long that it's just structural now. So we need some structural changes in terms of our investment. Okay, so then in terms of the private development requirements, love it, do it, let's go. Everyone needs to pay their fair share. I certainly am open to paying my fair share too, so yeah, let's do it. And then I just wanted to flag on the public engagement. I am unsatisfied by the only 2 meetings part. James, I thought that was a little like low. I'm curious if, for instance, there's other creative things we can do. I mean, this stuff is so visual. You have something that like so many other public works like projects don't necessarily have, which is like really good visuals of like to generate feedback and you know, I'm just wondering, like, can you do pop-ups, or are there things around the schools in the high flood zone areas, or around some of the priority CIPs where you like want the feedback, or like just something where you like kind of get out there a little bit more? And I know it's been 22 years, so no one's done this necessarily before, right? And that's cool, but like, let's learn from some of the other public works projects and plans and do a little bit more than those 2 community meetings, because that seems a little too small given the fact that people actually really care about this. And when we think about it, like when people care about something and we can bring this to them, like, can we then ask for more money in the future, right? Can we actually start to like leverage this project and this plan and this work to like incentivize people to get behind it and want to actually fund this? Can more of the general fund be used for this type of work? You know, can this become more of a priority for the council, this council and future councils, than it has been for past councils? All that starts with community engagement. So more than 2 meetings, please. Let's be a little more creative on that front. I would really appreciate it. And then I think everything else has been said. I support a lot of what my prior commissioners have said as well. And I think, like, just thank you so much for this. It's really exciting and wonderful to know that Public Works is really on this. And thank you so much to our new expert consultant, Justin. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kranz.
I want to start with a thank you to Matt for his excellent analysis of the failure modality of that New Year's Eve storm. That was pretty spot on. Well, thank you for that. So San Mateo's stormwater system is structurally aging. It's hydraulically undersized. It's operationally vulnerable. We've got increasing rainfall, reduced transit time. If you poured a gallon of water up at Crystal Springs, and how long does it take for it to come out the pump? I don't know that we have that data from when the pump was, when the system was designed. The gravity system, hybrid with lift stations, has the transit time increased? I would guess probably with service life, probably has. But has it increased to the level of being operationally significant? You have a puzzled look on your face.
No, I'm just thinking in terms of, I mean, hydrology hasn't changed a ton since these systems were designed. Our understanding of it has, right? So, I mean, as far as what's gone into the modeling, part of it is evaluating what happens to a raindrop when it hits the ground, right? I mean, that's foundational to this. It's understanding that graphic with the layers, right? I mean, what is rainfall hitting first? And then how is it moving through the system? And it's always hard to answer the question of when a rainfall hits, or when a raindrop hits the top of the system, how long does it take to get down and through a pump, right? Because, I mean, it's a complex flood control system.
What I was going for was to try and, for the other rest of my commissioners, to just give an idea that back when it was brand new, it was 100%, and now the needle is closer to 55%. It's lost some. There's accretion, there's siltation, there's things that make it run a little bit slower. And, you know, just to put to a frame of reference, Asheville, North Carolina last year, over 2,000 feet above sea level, flooded. They lost the Biltmore Hotel, and they're not even close to sea level. So this is more of a transit time throughput, certain areas getting backed up, the water can't get through, and then you have a local flood.
I think the good news about this plan is that it's showing, again, I mean, this gives us a little bit of confidence that we're showing sort of the same issues in a lot of places that the prior master plan did, right? And I mean, just to refer back to the examples that we use, Laurel Creek is a great one, right at George Hall School. That's been sort of a known capacity choke point for a while, for a 100-year event, right? This master plan, I think we've been able to be a little bit more flexible and creative in figuring out how to solve that problem without just, say, expand the size of that existing culvert underneath George Hall, right? Because the model is more detailed, it gives us a little bit more ability to sort of think through other means of handling that. So, yeah, and I mean, part of it, I know Jimmy and James were they came to me with an email and said, hey, we have this vegetation issue in Laurel Creek. Can we use these models to explore how important that is to address? And I mean, I think that's kind of one of the issues you're referring to here is that some of that buildup of vegetation that's happened over the years, how is it impacting the system's ability to move water through? And we were able to use the model to evaluate that issue and tell them, hey, you know what, you're right. That is going to be a hugely important part of this CIP that maybe doesn't come through as, an infrastructure project, but, James mentioned having a creek maintenance plan in place that, doesn't require a permit every time they need to manage that vegetation. So that's been part of it.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think one of the things that is much more of a challenge today than maybe it was in the past was being able to go inside of a creek and just remove vegetation. Now, that's an action that requires multi-agency permitting, and when we sit in front of those permitting agencies, they tell us, well, once it is an emergency, then you can act. And so that's one of the challenges, but that's also one of the things that the city's working on too with a citywide creek maintenance program.
Right, okay. I haven't heard tonight talked about at all the hydraulic pipes that go under 101, which theoretically are undersized and could have some siltation problems. We look at just past the pipe, downstream of the pipes, the lagoon, the siltation in the lagoon. That seems to be somewhat problematic. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so actually another part of this effort was doing a completely updated survey of all the creeks and Marina Lagoon. And all of that bathymetric data, which basically is just a fancy term for underwater topography, is actually folded into these models. As far as the 101 crossings, there is one that we have flagged as a pretty high priority project, right? There's one in particular that is it seems to be undersized. Thankfully, most of them, assuming that they are operating free and clear, which is an assumption, because we did not CCTV all of those, seem to provide enough capacity to get water across the highway today. Now, one of the weaknesses in sort of our climate change scenarios is that some of those smaller Highway 101 crossings may begin to crop up as capacity choke points. So again, I mean, separating the issues, we have identified some of those crossings that are undersized today. And then, our climate change scenarios are saying that, as time goes by and you find opportunities with Caltrans doing projects, it might be smart to start upsizing some of those, right? So all of that information has been folded into the models. And as far as sediment buildup, I think one of the I guess, silver linings here is that a lot of that silt buildup sits below sort of what's referred to as your active flood control range in the lagoon. Right. So the good news that has come out of the models is that when we're running sort of that 100-year event, we are still showing a similar or the same base flood elevation in the model that was defined the last time it was studied for FEMA. So that FEMA mapping doesn't seem to have changed up to now, assuming that all the pumps are operating properly and they're kept in good order. So that's the good news that comes out of this. That's not to say that the master plan ignores the possibility that sediment starts to impact. And the focus there, at least, has been on the southern end of the lagoon where O'Neill Tide Gate is, right? Where you get sort of the most sediment influx into the lagoon. And it tends to settle out most readily. And if the city were to undergo a sediment management plan, I mean, my opinion here would be that it would need to focus on the southern part where it could start impacting that flood control volume sooner.
To use a word, that's because of the DNA of the silt, where it's not coming from Sugarloaf Mountain, where we originally thought it was sloughing, making its way in. It's actually being brought in from the bay.
I think you have some coming from Laurel Creek too, because Laurel Creek is it's a decently large drainage area compared with, you know, the other two smaller channels that run into the lagoon.
And
so
one of them has an alluvial fan. You can see where the stuff is being dropped off. Yeah. Okay. How much of our infrastructure with the lagoon, how much has it reached end of life, and can it be renewed, or does it have to be replaced?
that's hard to put a number on because one of the GIS attributes is not necessarily the installation date. So, I mean, that's difficult to put a number on. The pump station assessment does have ages on all of those. I don't remember them off the top of my head. Some of them are 40 years old, which is really kind of pushing end of life for some of those facilities. And that is a prioritization factor for the pump stations. One of the challenges here has been, how do we take 4 different types of projects and prioritize them in a unified list?
Great question.
It's been fun.
Well, I'm trying to keep it moving. I'm looking at the time. I'm trying to keep it moving. So, one shoreline. I don't want to get in the weeds, but one shoreline. Does it make sense to not bring the one shoreline dike all the way to the O'Neill gates, but maybe build a second set of gates right at the shoreline where the dike would be? Would that save us money?
Which part of the shoreline?
So
Sorry, because there's a one shoreline going on up at Millbrae and Burlingame.
Well, it starts in downtown San Francisco, ostensibly, and it goes all the way down to Milpitas. Foster City's got it done.
Yeah.
At some point, we're going to be doing it. Does it make more sense to instead of rehabbing that gate, is to just build another gate, eliminating, because the other day I was emailing Matt, the what would you call it? The area alongside 101 upstream of the gate was underwater. It was absolutely, because of the rain, it was flooded. King tide and all that hydraulic pressure up against the gate, probably not a big deal. But does it make more sense to stop the water at the bay as opposed to, and then you don't have to build a dike up to the gate and then back on the other side?
That depends on who you ask. Permitting agencies may not love that. That's been a difficult subject on any coastal project we've worked on. Going offshore at all has its challenges, right? And that includes going to the mouth of a slough like that when you have sort of environmentally sensitive areas. And that area that flooded during those storms, well, really during that high tide event, that king tide event, I immersed myself in that too. That happened to be the highest tide level that has been recorded at that Redwood City gauge. Now, that's not the highest tide level that's been recorded throughout the bay, but locally, it was pretty high. It was about a 20-ish year tide event. And yeah, and I mean, that area is a mapped floodplain. So while it may not be underwater all the time, and you may not see that happen too often, it is a mapped floodplain where that water came up near the highway.
Speaking of bathymetric data, do we have access to the LiDAR map?
The county's 2017 LiDAR is publicly available information if you know how to use it, which, you know, I mean, GIS software is kind of the standard for pulling that stuff in and looking at it, and that was used in this study.
Okay. I was going somewhere with this. I'm moving my way up the lagoon. Oh, we talked about doing a pump study. We talked about there's a possibility of cavitation. It could be asymmetric disc loading on the. So the $250,000, which could easily become $300,000, is a sunk cost. We may get the bad news kids, it cavitates. You just lost $250,000. Does it make more sense to roll that money into the electric pumps that I've heard talked about that would be put the wet well would be at a lower level that could pump the lagoon down further. We could use these 480-volt three-phase pumps more readily, and maybe cycle the diesel pumps. That one pump runs once a month just to keep them exercised, and then they're not our main wheelhouse. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, rather than thoughts, right now the physical modeling study, the agreement's been awarded, and we're kicking off that study right now.
The wet well study?
Yeah, there will be a physical model of the entire Marina Lagoon pump station. And so, obviously, we can't predict what the results are going to be. But at this point, we've passed along the drawings that we do have available from the pump station. I will say that the consultants that we did interview for the modeling, both the consultants that we interviewed felt fairly confident based on their experiences working and modeling pump stations, that if there were modifications made, that it would be able to demonstrate that we might be able to lower the lagoon. Now, again, that is not a promise. We can't guarantee the modeling results, but that's the sense that I got from both consultants.
600 RPM at mid-40s degree water, even with some turbidity, the chance of, or the onset of cavitation is really, really, really low. Anyway, moving on from that. Thoughts about an electric pump station? Is that something that would be a future endeavor, something that's on the drawing board? What are you seeing?
To answer that question, I think it's something that we haven't exactly fully evaluated in terms of looking at electric pump station. It comes with certain pros and cons, cons being the ability to kind of keep that station running in an emergency event with power, right?
And that's why you'd keep the diesels.
Right, so there's a few of these issues too that we have to look into. And not to say that we haven't or we won't, but I think at current projections, we haven't looked at that, Commissioner. Those are things that I'd be happy to talk to our pump station consultant about to kind of get his feedback, and I can follow back up with you if you want to.
So it sounds like we have three really consequential strategic decisions to make. How to proceed with the Marina Lagoon pump station. Do we do a mega standalone project, or do we do some sort of an integrated, holistic? And it depends on this. It would depend on, and the result would be the speed at which we accomplish this stuff. So do we want to piecemeal it out and get it done? But it seems like we're always chasing the tail of the problem. As the problem gets bigger, we're kind of nibbling at it. Question two is, how aggressively can we close the funding gap? And that's going to depend a lot on a pay-as-you-go program, or are you going to do bonding and grants? And it's really dependent on, is the money available? Can it be, is the grant money, bonding money palatable to the population? And is it generally available? So the third thing is the level of service. Are we going for minimum compliance, or are we going for resiliency-driven standards? And I think that speaks a little bit to the ponding problem we talked about earlier. We're not looking for a 100% system that's stellar. We want to get the job done, but we also want to enhance and make the public feel that this is important and that we know how to do this. If you show up to your house and it's under a foot of water, the street's under a foot of water every time it rains, there's a confidence problem. And much like bringing cable TV out to a house, if it's one house that's in front of the driveway is flooded and it's 300 feet away, the cost-benefit analysis is, you're pretty far down the list as far as getting that fixed. We get that. That makes a lot of sense. So for the decision makers, we got to figure out where to concentrate high risk reduction first, how fast, given the limited revenue, how fast to act, and what standard of protection the community expects. Climate change is not a risk multiplier. It's a risk multiplier. It's not a root cause. It's been raining since forever. So we're getting a little bit more rain. It's a risk multiplier. The current storm fee is operationally necessary, but it's structurally insufficient to do some of these projects that we want to do. It's the difference between lunch money and your college fund, in a word. So It's adequate to sustain core operations and maintenance like we're doing right now, and initiate planning and limited construction, identify some priority projects. But it's not adequate to deliver identify capital programs at a glacially slow pace with timelines that are not keeping up with the climate change, and to address the Marina Lagoon pump station without external financing or any kind of additional revenue. Just to do it on the stormwater fee plus whatever you can scrape off the corners, it's not fair to you. You can't do your job without the right amount of money to do this. And it's everybody's water. It's not the people that live along the edge of the Marina Lagoon who's happen to get their house flooded. Sucks being you or me. But it's everybody's water. And I openly admit, I don't understand how it's like Maslow. This is the bottom layer of safety, no flooding. And yet we're funding other things that goes to my saying you can have anything you want, you just can't have everything you want. So anyway, I'm done. That's my, my TED Talk.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, Commissioner, that I will say is that the storm fee that was passed,
right.
I mean, we had momentum because of the atmospheric river sequences that happened. And so some of the challenges with, getting buy-in is oftentimes we'll encounter a perspective of, well, I don't flood, so it's not my problem.
I ended the Titanic's not sinking.
And so that's the challenge that we have, obviously. And so, that's something that we'll need to be creative about for funding.
And I applaud
like
you
Matt
guys for doing so much with occasionally so little. Yeah, it's amazing. Okay, I'm good.
Thank you. Okay, Youth Commissioners. Youth Commissioner Scott, do you want to?
Yeah, I can go first. Just one question on the master plan. I was curious about how you guys were talking about earlier about using like concrete to maybe like defer water a little bit, and I was like wondering if you guys had like considered that at all in your plan to sort of maybe use some like pavement or something to defer water from areas of like flooding to less water with like that are able to handle the water better.
So I think I kind of alluded to this earlier that the more up-to-date models, we are able to look at a little bit more how do we use existing capacity in adjacent systems, which isn't necessarily something that the prior master plan considered quite to this extent. So, I mean, one of the examples was there was this enormous project contemplated in the last plan, and there were sort of two elements that the updated plan added to that. There is a project there still. Again, good thing. We're not missing anything that the prior master plan found was a problem. But what we've been able to do is look at using some of the street conveyance a little bit more effectively, and B, how do we interconnect some of these parallel pipe systems with new pipes to avoid upsizing that entire system that actually ran through, in some spots, private properties, right? So I think we've just been able to build more efficient projects with it.
Okay, great. Also, just looking towards like the minor stormwater projects, I understand like the puddling being less prioritized for like smaller roads, but I think it would be a good idea to sort of largely prioritize puddling on like big streets like El Camino. I know that's been a big problem. Like I know like 2 weeks ago there was some rain and I was driving on El Camino and like the whole like sides of the road were like completely flooded. So I think maybe prioritizing puddling on like a bigger scale where it actually like poses like threats to safety could be more like put to higher prioritization levels than smaller individual base-to-base things. Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Singh?
Hi, not to be repetitive, but I was going to circle back to Marina Lagoon. I know you said that all of these pumps have a limited service life, and that we're planning to have like a sub pump station with the $121 million in improvements. So, what would like the installation process look like? Like, what is the timeline we're looking at with like the service life being limited and like all of these pumps having existed for 40 plus years?
Yeah, I mean, pump stations are fairly complex systems, and while we can assign a service life to them, maintaining them properly can involve rebuilding certain components to extend those service lives and sort of make sure that you get the expected life out of them and beyond, right? And these aren't systems that have been set it and forget it, right? Maintenance staff generally are looking at these things all the time, and they understand what parts need to be rehabilitated, taken out, fixed, put back into place. And that's an important element of maintaining the existing station while that project is being considered, right? I mean, speaking to the timeline of the actual project is more difficult because funding has to be found first, right? Or at least a strategy needs to get put together. But as far as that project goes, I know one of the things that has been kicked around is splitting it into sort of two more manageable, digestible phases where that first station gets built. Maintenance keeps doing their thing on the existing station to keep it running and in good order. And if something needs to be replaced in the meantime, that rises to the level of sort of emergency work that needs to be considered before that project gets built, right? I think everybody kind of understands that here, right? So I don't know if James or anybody wants to add to that.
Well, I mean, I'd say like if we started tomorrow designing that new station, it's still going to be years.
Like
I mean,
maybe 7 to 8 years. Yeah. I can give you a reference for County Point Poplar Pump Station. I picked up working on the project when I was an intern for the city of San Mateo. So it's been quite some time on that improvement. And a lot of that is getting permits. Getting permits to operate in that system took us 5 to 6 years. The design work was maybe another 2 to 3 years. And then the physical construction was actually the shortest part. It took us 2.5 years to do. So it is a very long process because of so many stakeholders that are involved to ensure that these things are done in the right way. So to answer your question, how long can happen? We have the money tomorrow and all the permits, 3-4 years, maybe, right? But I'm not the one building the pump station, so I can only make a guesstimate on what that would look like, but it will take some time.
I'm a kindred spirit here. I started my career with Schaffenwheeler in 2014. I believe I started working on Coyote and Poplar that year. I left the company 4 years later. I came back, and then I kept working on that project. So, I mean, yeah, the timeline on that one was long. And actually, I worked on that one from its inception. I left, I came back, they had just finished building it, and I actually went past building it to doing the letter of map revision to remove the actual floodplain designation. So that project extended even longer.
Right, I know you just were talking about Coyote and Poplar, but I know you mentioned after the 2022 and 2023, like that whole like season in the winter, you strengthened certain facilities at the pump station. So what did that look like?
We primarily did a lot of work at the Marina Lagoon pump station, and prior to that storm season, there's 5 pumps out there. We had pulled all 5 of those pumps. They're huge pumps. We'll show you pictures sometime. I mean, they're massive pumps. We had all those pumps fully rehabilitated, cleaned up, recoated, and everything. So the pumps are in good shape as of a few years ago. We finished up all 5 of those. And then we did full, complete assessments on the 5 diesel engines that run all those pumps, and we invested significant hundreds of thousands of dollars in improvements to fix those diesel engines. And then there are other things. These pumps can corrode because they're in salt water. So there's a system that helps to protect them from corroding, and so that system was not functional. We fixed that system. So there's been a variety of things that we've done at the Marina Lagoon pump station. That's the main one. We also had to redo some of the motors, I think, at the 42nd Avenue pump station when that station flooded on New Year's Eve. So I think those are the 2 stations that we had to do more significant investments in after the storm events.
Right, okay, that would be all for my questions. In terms of feedback, I would say like some things that I really like about like the current master plan that you guys presented today was the fact that it takes into account like the different like kinds of like rainfall that we could expect, like, you know, like the 10-year and the 100-year thing, considering that we had this like sudden like onslaught like 3 years ago or 4 years ago where it was just like way too much for anyone to handle, or it was like just unprecedented. Yeah, just to like echo the sentiments of like my other commissioners, I do think that we should increase funding for what you could consider minor stormwater projects. I do think like those are regular inconveniences that I see almost like every like winter whenever I'm going to school. So like it would be great if we could get that out of the way. And yeah, I think everything else looks perfect, and I feel like everyone else touched on the rest of the concerns I had. That was a great presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So,
One more?
sure.
Promise.
Go ahead.
We haven't talked about dredging. Bang for the buck. What's your feeling on dredging? Efficacy? Is it going to improve matters much? You got it.
I think that depends on how much operational flexibility you really want out of the lagoon, right? Because I mean, I mentioned that the south end is where kind of you're seeing the most accumulation, or at least it seems that way. And I think there's actually a dredging alternatives report out there that agrees with that assessment. I mean, I think this all hinges on sort of that new station being built in the first place, because the existing station, I don't know that it quite gives that level of operational flexibility that you could really expand sort of the flood control pool in Marina Lagoon without having other pumps that can kind of handle that hydraulically, right? And I mean, I don't want to go too far into the weeds here, but sea level rise compounds that issue by putting more pressure on those pumps, right? So, I mean, I think you kind of have to consider what to prioritize before you really consider, you know, what benefit you might get out of dredging from, like I said, from an operational flexibility standpoint. I think today you wouldn't see a whole lot of benefit because there's not tons of sedimentation in that flood control pool. But that's just, I mean, that's a high level assessment.
Even though all the creeks have a bit of an alluvial thing.
They do, but I mean, our survey kind of shows that it hasn't reached the level of impacting the lagoon and really the system as a whole, its ability to provide that level of flood control that's, I mean, like I said earlier, shown on sort of the FEMA maps, right? It's maintaining that ability to do that in spite of, you know, sort of the sediment that's settled into the dead pool.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So I was just going to go back to the just some questions and comments about the questions you brought to us. So for the nuisance puddling, if we don't allocate this limited portion, then these projects just don't get fixed and they get put into that hierarchy of project lists, right? And would be low priority.
Effectively, yes.
Yeah. And then when these projects are fixed, it was really helpful when you described how that happens. Would you consider those like Band-Aid fixes, or is this contributing to the overall health of the entire system in the long term?
Those fixes are I wouldn't call them Band-Aid. They're permanent fixes. They're the end-all type of fixes that we do out there. At least when it comes to stormwater and ponding, you know, like if you don't fix it completely, there's no point in even doing it, right?
Yeah.
So the improvements that James work on when we're doing these, I'm going to call localized ponding projects. When we work on these localized ponding projects, the end goal is to remove all the flooding or the issues in that area, not to either push it down the line or either to mitigate it.
Got it. So yes, I agree that we should continue to allocate that funding for all the reasons my other commissioners mentioned too. And then about the master plan, are those, about private development, would that be connected to the green infrastructure requirements? Because just in the photos that looked like the stormwater, it looked like a lot of what you see for green infrastructure. Is that the same, or would they be added on requirements?
It would be linked. It could be resulting into more green infrastructure improvements, but it can also relate to different types of stormwater types of requirements that developers follow in cities for improvements. So
that could relate to how water or stormwater is retained or detained on site as opposed to being released in the system. Unique to our master plan is the elements related to climate change, which aren't normally provided into private development improvements that would be studied or evaluated here. There's a lot of host issues that we can study and look into with private developments, but I think it's not just related to green infrastructure improvements.
It's beyond it too. Okay. Well, yeah, I agree also with my commissioners that we should completely go for it because it's better spend that money now than down the drain, I guess. But thank you for your presentation. I think everyone's expertise on this really shined and more than I could imagine knowing about our stormwater master plan. And I think we are done. I'm ready to, unless there's, any reports or announcements?
Sure, I can start off and just say that sort of related to the presentation earlier tonight on the transportation side of things, there is a survey that we are looking for people to fill out that is on the Central El Camino plan, and that's the plan that's a multi-jurisdictional plan that's looking at sort of re-envisioning what we want to see on El Camino, and it's looking at San Mateo, Belmont, San Carlos, and Redwood City. So there is a survey. If you just Google Central ECR plan, you should be able to find the QR code for that. We can also send it out to the commissioners after this meeting.
Appreciate it.
And then I also want to say that plan will be, there will be a presentation to City Council on that plan at the February 23rd meeting. So the second meeting in February, that will be an item on the council agenda. So, and you guys have heard about that plan previously, but this will be presenting sort of the latest status of things on that to the council.
Do you want to share
I got one.
announcement?
So I had an idea. No, you should be nervous. So in San Mateo, we talk about electrification. We're trying to reduce pollution and what's some of the low-hanging fruit that we can pull this off with very little cost and have a good cost-benefit analysis. So I was thinking about it. I brought it up with Matt. He's actually sent this off to his traffic engineers. In streets in San Mateo where there's 2 lanes of travel, if it's possible and it makes sense, make the right lane right turn only so that the traffic that's going straight would have to move over to the left lane, so you would have less vehicles sitting there idling. Pollution, you'd also increase throughput through the city because traffic would move. It wouldn't be every intersection. It would be key intersections. And I'm just asking, I think you've already started asking the engineers to have a look at this, but in trying to make San Mateo more green and better throughput, just wanted to find out, do you think it's a good idea?
I will clarify, I guess, that my understanding of our previous discussion was you were asking about a specific intersection, so we've asked our traffic engineers to look at that specific intersection. Right. We're not looking at this on a citywide basis.
No, I know that, but if this works and it makes sense.
I think that stuff like this is stuff that requires doing some sort of analysis at the locations that you're talking about doing it. I don't think we could look at doing something on a citywide basis, given that, one, you don't have right turn lanes everywhere. So I think it's something that would have to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, but usually it's going to be driven by your circulation needs in terms of what you need to be able to get cars through, and so that's going to be the driving factor of whether or not anything like this would be feasible.
Perfect. So we could look at this one as an experiment and see if it works. As it turns out, the mirror image, the street across from it, the opposite, the incoming, has that feature where the rightmost lane is right turn only, coming from Fashion Island. So okay. All right, thank you. That's all I got.
Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Guys.